where everything from your wastewater treatment to the water that comes out of your tap with Mr. Grove's assistance and your trash removal and so forth. So as you want to field questions to us, I will occasionally farm to the subject matter experts out so we can give you a precise answer when possible. So I'll try to run through this really briefly, and if you have a really urgent dime, just please raise your hand. I'll try to answer it as is, but let's see if we can refrain from most of the questions coming towards the end. First slide, are we there? Okay. I think this is what everybody's been calling them about, and this is what I've seen on social media, and I think this is all of this type of activity is what you experienced on Monday night, and it was pretty bad. And if we can go ahead and go to the next slide, I want to give the stats to what actually happened. I know the mayor mentioned that his rain gauge collected at least 5 inches. But what I can share with you is, because we did have Public Works out and about and spoke with many citizens, is that we have the wastewater treatment plant that measured 3.14. For those of you who don't know, the wastewater treatment plant, as you go over Wilkerson's coming into town, it's a mile to your right in the back of those woods there. So it's pretty far away from the meadows and from Classic Shores. And that even they received 3.4 inches of rain under an hour. While we were out, we also identified that there were rain gauges measuring over 5 inches, as the mayor indicated, over in the meadows. And then in Classic Shores, we even had one rain gauge that measured 8, could have measured more, but got knocked down because of the wind. So we know that 8 inches went in there. I don't know what the scientific term is. I've heard the term microburst. I've heard the term just a significant thunderstorm, extremely localized, but it really doesn't matter. If you think about it, you've had 5 inches, which is considerable, a sheet of water that hit the ground under an hour. And that's massive. And what I'm going to do right now is try to explain to you just the magnitude of what you've already experienced. So if you look at this table that I've provided you, if you have the presentation, it gets a little wonky because there's a lot of numbers there, but essentially what it's showing you is the top reading left to right, what the frequency is of that type of rainfall, and if you go from top to bottom, you can see within the time limits. So if you look at the chart, you kind of look, and let's say if we look at the first red circle, that indicates that within 60 minutes, even though the storm itself was 45, I was conservative and said, okay, within an hour. So within 60 minutes, we received well over 2.19 inches of rain, which would indicate, if you go up to the top left and look, it's a 10. That means that's a 10-year storm. That's a 10-year storm. So the bottom line to that is, if you look at the actual measurements that we just discussed, we had anywhere, depending on where you were at, whether it was the meadows or the Classic Shores, you had anywhere between a 200 and a 500-year storm that you just experienced. And what does that mean? What does that mean? That's just a saying. Well, that means that statistically speaking, that kind of rain falling at that rate of speed for that short period of time, through the history of the data we've collected in weather, lets us know that that should only happen, statistically speaking, every 200 to 500 years. So you just lived through a massive burst of rain. We also know that our weather data only goes back a couple of hundred years, but we're going to leave those number functions to the statisticians and so forth. But it's pointing you to a massive amount of water hitting your table, and what does that relate to our infrastructure and other infrastructures around the country? So I went out and I was able to talk with the project engineer, and I said, well, that's a great number and that's great to share, but what does it mean? So if you look at state roads, so VDOT roads, Route 205, our big road out here that goes into town, we're talking 2 lanes, massive ditches, it's not a highway, but it's the closest thing you're going to get, and that's our main artery, is only designed to a 10-year standard. Think about that. Only designed to a 10-year standard. If you go to Route 1, which is one of the most historic highways in the nation that's been around since the very beginning, ergo Highway 1, it's only designed for a 25-year storm. And if you look down here at the mighty 95, which is over-engineered in a lot of areas, going all the way up from the Northeast all the way down to Florida, massive construction, huge layoffs. The road is built to probably the highest quality of any interstate. It too is only designed for a 50-year storm. We just experienced a 200 to 400-year storm in your area. Now the irony is I live on the point. I didn't get one raindrop. 3 years ago, on the other hand, I got the straight line winds that tore my house all to pieces with probably about 24 inches of hail. So we're experiencing these microbursts, and as everybody's watching in the weather, we're seeing more and more of those as time goes on. There's changes in the weather. But I thought that was critical to share with the public, because until I took this job, until I worked with the subject matter experts, I didn't know the relevance of it. You know, what does it mean? 50-year storm, 100-year storm. We have Interstate 95. It would have to be built 10 times the magnitude to what it is to be able to handle the rain that the Meadows got. So I just wanted to put it into perspective and kind of drive that home of just how much water you experience. Before we even got that rain, go ahead, sir.
My name is Tony Devaney. I'm a new resident here.
Nice to meet you.
I live on Locust. I understand about this storm that just came through. We had the same issue a week ago. We didn't have a 50-year storm then. We had the same issue 2 weeks ago on Locust from just a thunderstorm. Okay, there's still standing water in ditches on Locust. It's been standing there so long, it's growing algae and fungus. Okay, so it's not just this one storm. This storm was an exception to the rule. I understand that.
I think if you let it finish, I think you'll explain some of that.
I do plan to get to the direction.
How the ditches work.
Yeah. All that being said, as you actually just pointed out, you gave me a great segue in it. Before the rain even came down, we had already had a massive amount of rain for the last week or two. So the ground was already saturated before it even came down, which compounded the matter even worse. So you're right, there is standing water, and we're going to address that in a minute, but we'll go ahead to the next slide so we can get in that general direction. All right, a lot of the history I've seen on social media where everybody has a discussion piece about what the Meadows used to be, what the numbered streets used to be, primarily Meadows though, because we all know it's at one point, and not the too distant past, it was a farm. And that is true, it was an agrarian area. It was developed about 50 years ago, and it had a lot of depressions in it, divvies if you will, or basins. And as it was developed 50 years ago, some of the development standards and practices and procedures that were in the 1960s that were allowable are not to today's standards. So it was much more free build where you can. They didn't have the same amount of regulatory stuff that we have now. So that's kind of also like a path of how we got where we're at. Additionally to that, nobody looked at the town and looked at the Meadows when they went through massive development phases as a holistic stormwater management system approach. Back then it wasn't uncommon for somebody to say, hey, you bought the property, it's incumbent upon you to take care of it, and as long as the water's off of the roads, life will move on, and that's just the way it was back then. In addition to that is we've had infrastructure out in the Meadows for 50 years, and what we're experiencing is, I'm sure everybody can understand and imagine, that if something's been under the ground holding water, making sure that it works, after 50 years it's probably lost a lot of its useful life. So you do have some decaying infrastructure in there as well. And we'll get to some of the fixes that we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years to combat that. In addition to that, we're fortunate enough to have a planning commission, and for at least the last 20 years we've been working under a comprehensive plan mentality. And what does that really mean? What did I just say? If you stay for the meeting and you listen, we actually have an elected body or an appointed body that tackles these plans at a holistic level. They're looking at your town and saying, okay, we want to grow, got it, but how do we want to grow? What are the things that need to be considered? What are the do's and don'ts? What are the best practices? How can we do it the best way possible? And that's relatively new if you think about when the infrastructure was built 50 years ago. So we're operating under a comprehensive plan philosophy. Please understand that the Meadows was built many decades before that. And what you're also having is just general, we're a coastal town. I got it, the Meadows is about 6 feet over sea level, but please understand that it is flat. If you live in a Piedmont area or in a mountainous area, You have some elevation to where you can route the water a little bit easier. We all know where the water eventually goes. It goes down to the sea level, right? Well, the flatter it is, the slower it moves. So the more it falls at a faster rate and it's not going as fast, you're going to get the accumulation that you experience. So that's unique when you're in a coastal town. A lot of coastal towns, especially on the East Coast, they tackle this thing every day and what's the best way to do it and how can we get the water off. But also, there's a catch-22 to it, because as a general rule of practice, we also want the water not to run too fast because we want the ground to absorb it. We want to replenish the water that's under the ground that we use for drinking. So the whole idea behind the concept of getting water out of your yard or getting it away from things that can damage us, it's all well and good, but understand that at the state and at the federal level, they want to see that not go as fast. If you notice in the Torrey Smith Park that we built, we have those basins with trees in it. That is by design, and it costs a lot of money to do it, by the way, because Mr. Howarth could probably for the next 2 hours explain the math that we want to capture X amount of rain, catch it in that basin so it doesn't run off too fast, let it absorb into the ground, and it's a science. And before I took the job of town manager, I had a little appreciation of just how much science goes into this. I mean, we're talking about pretty complex math that they're having to figure out what does 2 inches mean on 2 acres or 1.65 acres, and how many trees would you plant to soak that in and still let groundwater get down, and then 1,000 years from now that it reaches finally the aquifer and it's all pure, and those folks 1,000 years from now can drink it. So when you look at the Torrey Smith Park, please appreciate the amount of design that went in it that has nothing to do with the basketball courts. As a matter of fact, I'm here to tell you that the design, the dirt moving, and the tree planting was more expensive than the actual courts itself. And guess what? Because we did it the right way, it actually performs better than it did before when it had nothing on it. So just imagine, we put 2 tennis courts on there, 2 basketball courts on there, a playground, and some walkways, and we're actually absorbing more water now than we had before, because before it would eventually run off at a faster rate and go into your stormwater system. And that's something that is not necessarily fun or sexy to talk about when we were building it, but if we find ourselves here talking about getting 4 to 8 inches of rain in 45 minutes, what a great example to use. Next slide, please. So now we've talked about kind of how we got there, the history, and we've talked about the magnitude of what we got. What I wanted to do is share with you some of the things that citizens can do to help us, because these are some of the problems we've ran into in the past. And it's nobody of any malice trying to do these things. It's just you don't know what you don't know until you have water back up in the yard or in the neighborhood. But these are things that I was able to sit down with our public works leadership and say, hey, what are some of the things that you live every week with, and what makes it harder and, quite frankly, more expensive? Because the citizens don't want their taxes to go up. They pay enough taxes. How can we make it more efficient? And here are some of the things that they shared with me. And the first one is rest assured, our stormwater system in Colonial Beach is designed to hold a 10-year storm. But if you go back to that table versus what we have, there's a big delta, there's a big difference there. But something that I didn't know until I got into this business is that ditches are actually not designed to take water off of your yard. It's actually not designed for that. The whole purpose and idea and behind ditches is to capture the water coming off and to allow the water coming off the road to capture that water so you can drive and not have a wreck and the road's traversable. And the byproduct, the goodness for the person who lives on the road, is that just nature, naturally, some of it goes down that way. But ditches themselves are actually not designed for the homeowner to have their water go to. It's just a side benefit. And I found that kind of neat and interesting. And that's nationwide, by the way. That's not Colonial Beach. That's like everywhere in the country. The next one, and I think we all have seen it, is that sometimes citizens have a historical pattern. I remember doing it when I was younger, to where you rake the yard in the autumn, or you have trees, and eventually the debris that you're trying to clean off of your yard makes it into the ditch. And sometimes you burn it. Other folks just kind of let it sit there and let nature take its course, or in this case, stormwater take its course. But the problem is when somebody performs that activity, so let's say somebody burns it, you've created ash, which is not sturdy ground. which then a huge massive rainfall occurs like this, which is going to push it into a pipe, and then the stick comes, and the next thing, lo and behold, you've got a clog. And then you've got a whole neighborhood that the water's just going to go up. So that one individual on that one block can affect multiple houses if they perform putting debris and burning leaves and stuff like that into the stormwater basins. We've actually had an issue with, and I get it, we've had an issue with citizens filling in ditches in front of their house. Let's face it, we're on very small lots here in Colonial Beach. I mean, they are. They're very small lots, and parking is at a premium, especially in the summer. And folks are saying, how on earth can I, have friends over and have 5 or 6 cars? And we've had issue where people would go and fill in the actual ditch, not understanding that it's going to have a secondary and tertiary effect. And then, unbeknownst to us, because we don't know they did that, we'll get a massive rain like we did, and that whole neighborhood might be flooded that was never flooded before, or it wouldn't flood that frequently. And we're having to go to homeowners on a consistent basis and identify these things as best we can and say, hey, look, we didn't put the ditches there for uniformity's sake. They're there for a reason, and they're performing a vital function, because if we clog that up, you're going to see what you did on Monday. You're going to see that. Another thing that we've run across quite a bit is people putting culvert pipes for their driveway. And again, it makes sense. I get it. You got to have a culvert. You got a ditch. You're trying to get to your property. You need a culvert pipe. And a lot of citizens, to their credit, say, you know what? Even though it's in the right of way, I want to take ownership on it. I want to do the right thing and put a culvert pipe in, not understanding or realizing that the size of the pipe matters, the material of the pipe. I'll give you an example that happened a couple of months ago to Mr. Groves. That they ran into an issue, and the individual didn't use a concrete pipe. They had a plastic pipe. Well, drive a full-size truck over a plastic pipe every time, it's going to crush down. Bad things are going to happen. There you go. It stopped up again. The material and the diameter of what you're putting in place is critical, because you don't want something too big and you don't want something too small. And if people were to interact with Public Works and say, hey, look, this is what I want to do, tell me the right way to go about it, they're going to work with you and hear you out and fill you in on how to go about these things. Another thing that we've ran across is some citizens maintain the right-of-way, some don't. Now, we try to do it on a biannual basis where we go along the right-of-way and we cut everything down and we try to keep everything clean. We have about 52 miles of road. It's about 52 miles of road in Colonial Beach. And our Public Works Department isn't that big to be able to do that on a weekly basis. But the general rule, I want to say culturally, is that most people take pride in their front yards, and they take care of that 2 or 3 feet of right-of-way because they use it, quite frankly. And they're like, well, I want to keep it nice, I want to keep it aesthetically pleasing, and they take care of it. Not everybody does. So if we spend a lot of time getting those branches out and the leaves and the ashes, and then maybe it's overgrown, that makes it longer, which means we can only do it ever so often, which then could impact the amount of stormwater that rises up. And we've actually had situations where people thought the right-of-way was a part of their property, and they've planted bushes in the actual ditch line. That has been an issue, and I'm not talking small bushes. I'm bushes of magnitude, and you go there and they're upset because they spent quality money on putting bushes there. It looks good, it's aesthetically pleasing. They just didn't know. They didn't know that, hey, that's the right of way. I'm planting in the ditch, and they didn't understand just how important it is to keep that clear of everything. And of course, it's a no-brainer that once you put a big bush in the middle of the ditch, you're going to stop things up and just bad things happen. And the other thing that I just wanted to take the opportunity, and it's really not pointing fingers at anybody, but we have a fantastic Public Works work order system. If you go online and you have an issue and you're like, okay, it's not a 911 emergency, but it's something that I want taken care of, you don't have to go down to the Public Works facility or town hall. You can actually do it online and type it in, and it will be put in the roster. And usually what they do is they prioritize it depending on how severe the issue is. So if you have something that is pretty massive, they're going to get to it pretty quickly. But if it's something that, oh gosh, we don't really want to do that till fall because we're just going to be in the way during summertime, it might be further along, but you're more than welcome to call and find out the status, make sure it got in the computer system. But we do have a fantastic work order system. And when you go about it that way, you kind of make the Public Works' ability to respond to it that much easier, because it's coming in automated and they can look through it and they can process it that much more fluid. So I would offer to you, please, by all means, use it. If you don't know how, call Town Hall. We'll walk you through the website. We'll get you where you gotta go. Next slide, please. I don't want to talk and walk through all these, but I just wanted to show you over the last 2 years of all of the stormwater activity that we have worked on. I saw mention that, oh, there's not a plan, nothing's in place, we're just kind of reactionary. We're reactionary when it comes to an emergency, absolutely, as we should be. Just like you want your firemen and police, we're reactionary. We want to get there at 9 o'clock at night and fix something that is truly an emergency. But there's a lot of proactivity that goes on behind the scenes too. I know Public Works sits down continuously and they map out, okay, we have more than we can chew on, what should we do first and how should we do it? And they do take a strategic approach to tackling these problems. But we can always get better. A couple of highlights on this that I'd like to point out, because you just don't think about them, is a couple of years ago we were able to get a jet truck, and you've probably seen it around town. It's this big truck, and it almost kind of looks like a propane gas truck. And what that thing does for Public Works is it's able to go into those culverts that get stuck with the branches and the dirt and all that stuff. It's able to get in there and literally push the water out and free it out of the debris, and that thing has been a complete asset to our operations in town. Things cost money. Those things aren't cheap. We anticipate between maintenance and other equipment to tackle these things is just going to have to become naturally part of our budget process, to where we recognize that these are some valuable things that we do, but they do come at a cost. So as the next budgetary years come, don't be surprised when you see big ticket items and ask, what's a jet truck? A jet truck is the thing that cleans out those culverts, and that's been a big win for us. Another one was the boardwalk project where the statues are. A lot of people, we look at the concrete, we look at the statues, and we're like, thank God that got done and it's up there and everything's good. But there's a massive amount of piping under there, because it's one of the main hubs, if you will, for stormwater to come in that area so we can then get to the outfall. One of the great things about that project is we did get to do some beautification, but more importantly, what we were able to do underground, which, by the way, anything underground is 5 times more expensive than what you see above ground. So we were able to fix a lot of old problems with that particular grant, and it's been working really good down there. How we got here, I told you the magnitude of the storm. I told you about some of the things that are challenges to us, some of the things that we run across on a daily basis operationally. But where do we see us going this point forward? How do we get better? Because there's always room for improvement, continuous improvement. And I can only tell you that everybody up here is emphatic about making the stormwater system second to none, because we are a coastal town. We don't enjoy those elevations. And when the rubber meets the road and you get those 5 or 6 inches, as you saw Monday, it's very visible. And then after the visible becomes the very vocal. So what's our way ahead? And for those that go to council meetings, you've probably heard me say this a couple times. Been working on getting imagery of the town, I've flown a plane and they've got a gazillion pictures, and what does that mean? Well, that means that in order for us, because we are so flat, we can't just go to a map. So if we were in the mountains, we could go to a map and it would show us 2 meter elevation differences or 1 meter elevation difference. A meter is about up to here. And you could see, the way the hills are, and it's just easier to plan on something like that. The flatter the landscape gets, the shorter your increments need to be so you can plan off of. So we had to go out and find imagery of the whole town that would show us 1 foot elevation differences in order for us to correctly do this. And that's unique to flatland and coastal areas. Most of the U.S. can, I'll work off of a map, it's digitized anyway. Great thing about living next to the water is we live next to the water. The bad thing about it is we have to go out and perform things like that. But we did, and we got it. Just this week, we were able to take that imagery, and it truly is pictures with an airplane, just like the military does, and we've been able to digitize it. So now we have a map that shows us everything. And it allows us to see, for example, and I'm going to use Classic Shores, where your water is running, because not all of Classic Shores runs in one direction. Not all of the meadows runs in one direction. The meadows actually splits in two different ways, and you have to understand precisely where that split is. How deep is it? It's going all over the place, and we're going to build our stormwater management plan based off of gravity, where it's going to go. But we have to understand gravity, and we have to understand the land before we can do that. We also hire what's called a graphic information systems operator, and he is the individual that is able to take that data and take that map. It's very technical, and then be able to manipulate it to where the project engineer and public works and other subject matter experts can look at it, and we can design what's called overlays. So just layers of, oh, here's where our water system is going to go, here's where the sewer is going to go, here's where stormwater is going to go. And it allows us to plan effectively and understands, in this part of the meadows, we need an 18-inch pipe. Maybe in this part of the meadows, we need a 12-inch pipe, and then it becomes a lot simpler. What I'm really trying to share with you is that it takes time to get those things, but we have them now. And we're talking as recent as this week, we have them now. And now we get to go through the planning process. The neat thing about it is because we've gone this far along, and we've come so far in 2.5, 3 years. I mean, we've come light years away. I can raise my hand to all those people that give out grant money and say, hey, guess what? I have a comprehensive plan. We're updating it as we speak. I have imagery down to 1 foot elevation levels. I have hired the operator to be able to feed us the work. I have a town engineer who can take that work and do the computations and get us to the right solution set. The grant people know I'm serious. The grant people say, okay, this town legitimately wants to solve the solution, and grant money seems to open up a lot better when you have those things in place. And now we do. So I'm really excited about it. I could geek out probably for the next hour and tell you all the bells and whistles that we're going to be able to do with this type of stuff. It's really neat. I've been using the GIS system for about 17, 18 years now. So we literally went from almost like that 1980s blue screen technology in the town to being Windows-based, Office 365. Now I've got GIS, and we've done it very fast. And you're going to see the benefit of it in the next 2 to 5 years. And it's going to come quick. Some other things that we're doing is and I kind of mentioned the whole left level, except for the last bullet point. And the last bullet point is, hey, great, we did all this, but things do cost money. And if you remember, about 3 years ago, we were in a financial position that was not advantageous. We were losing money, and through the current leadership and through hard decisions, we've been able to take our town from what was running around $500,000 to $800,000 a year loss into pre-COVID, we were coming in $400,000 in the black. Well, we just freed up money to tackle these types of problems, and we had our first year last year where we can stand and say we came out of last year with over $400,000 in the black, and that is a massive swing. And now we get to talk, now we get fun problems. And the fun problem is going out and getting these operators and getting the imagery and being able to perform all these tasks. And that's where we're headed. So now we're going to be able to look at our budget, and COVID did put a wrinkle in everybody's budget, let's just be clear. It did, no surprise. But we get to look at our budget, and we get to start programming these things in on a year-to-year basis. Okay, what can we do year one? Do we need any jet truck repairs? How much of the meadows can we do? Have we identified which basins to work on first? We get to start making fun decisions that get us to our ultimate goal because we've been financially responsible. Talk the jet truck to death, I'll leave that one alone. The other thing we get to do based off of this is we get to go to our leadership, the council, and to the planning commission and say, hey, look, because we've gone through this exercise and we know operationally what we need to do first before the other thing, there might be some policies that we can suggest and recommend that council can then take and make the way we operate as a town better. And that just remains to be seen because we're not there yet. That's a step or two away. But those are the kind of things that you can expect out of leadership is is for us to give them recommendations, and then they make the right decision on what's the best path for Colonial Beach. So that's going to come up. This is, you don't think about it, but because we're talking ditches and rainwater, right? You don't think about technology, but there's being massive leaps in technological stuff that's happening all the time. I know Mr. Groves has gone out and we've rented a camera when we couldn't figure the problem that goes in the storm thing and finds where it is, and it saves us so many labor hours that we're saving the town money, your tax dollars, by being able to do that. So what we have to do is keep very abreast of the technology that's out there in the industry that we can manipulate for the benefit of the taxpayer. Usually when it comes to technology, we're usually saving a massive amount of labor if we can, which helps our bottom line, which means I'm not looking for any outside sources except for grants, and that's a good thing. And I've hit on grants and VDOT funding and some state and federal and emergency and FEMA stuff, and what we've been already guided by leadership to do is to aggressively pursue any and all outside money. Because council gets it. Council gets it. We cannot position ourselves to look at any tax increases, nor do we want to. So what does that mean to us, the people who work for you, the town folk? That means that we're looking for things outside of Colonial Beach. Virginia level funding, state level funding, FEMA. You're going to see with this coronavirus thing that they're going to pay a considerable amount of overtime. Well, FEMA deals with this stuff too, because this is where natural disasters occur. So we're going to look at all these other funding things that isn't directed towards the Colonial Beach taxpayer. Where can we go get monies outside? And that's our duty, to go out there and find those as they prop up. But that really concludes what I wanted to share. Thank you for letting me kind of get through that. I know it was a lot. I also know that I can be long-winded. I apologize. But there's so much information to share that I have to. I'd really like to take questions, and honestly, I'm just going to hand the microphone over to the appropriate person when appropriate. Eric?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to.
No, right.
Yeah, the GIS data, is that going to be available to the public?
I think products that we develop off of GIS data will be. The manipulation, like the actual ones and zeros, probably not so much. But products will be available to the public.
Will it actually define the boundaries of a lot?
It has that capability. It has that capability. What we ordered, and Rob has taken the last 20, we got it from Mr. Howarth. I think he gave it to us 24 hours ago, about 24 hours ago, and Rob's had a chance to kind of manipulate it. If you can imagine, so you have a base map, and it's not like the pretty green map that we're all accustomed to, is white backgrounds, black things, and then if you have all of the layers clicked on it, it makes no sense. It just looks like somebody just scribbled a whole bunch of stuff on paper, because it shows everything. There's a little tab that says mailboxes, and you click on it, and then the mailboxes will come off of it, and it says gravel driveway. You click on that thing, and then it shows you all the gravel driveways. So you have to learn how to it's exhaustive what it has. Houses, of course, but it doesn't come with lots. So I think what you're looking for is probably 3 years away, 4 years away, to where we want to take what the county has, which is a little bit dated, and be able to combine those two together and get, because Mr. Nelson's a realtor, so he sees a lot of value in being able to have a mapping system like that, and he's right. The first thing that we have to do is, because of Monday, what we experience is focus on the infrastructure first, with the understanding that is naturally the direction we want to go.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to say that primarily it's used, especially for natural disasters, hurricanes and things like that, where it finds best suited for. If our town folks aren't here for whatever reason, say a real unfortunate reason, like they're lost, not come back, another group can come in and use the GIS system to determine where most of our infrastructure lies, including our water pipes, our sewer pipes, and things like that, and we know where to start. Equally, it's a huge help for first responders when they're doing search grids in a tornado or a hurricane, where they can mark out areas and know exactly where they've been, so it's not duplicated over and over again and a waste of time. So it's a tremendous value. we should have had this 15 years ago, quite frankly. It's been around for a long time. We have it now, so don't worry about looking back at this one. We're gonna have it, it's gonna be useful, it'll be utilized, but it'll also have these features. Some of it, I believe, is still proprietary, is that correct? So that is always a little bit of an issue you run into. But at face value, it's a tremendous asset when you really have a big disaster or a need for like trying to find a broken pipe, part of this Washington Avenue out in front of us. So it's a huge help.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll get you in a second. And a part of that proprietary, sorry, I got to geek out for a second, is that just imagine if there are bad guys and bad folks out there in the world, just imagine if they knew where every electrical line is, every pipe, they could do a massive amount of damage. See, it is sensitive stuff, but to your point, once we get to that evolution to where we can show those lots things, it's going to make the citizens' life a ton easier. It's going to make the people who conduct business in this town, it's just, we're getting into the 21st century, and it's a good thing. I'm sorry, ma'am.
Thank you. With all due respect to my neighbors here, I'm representing Virginia Avenue and the North Beach, Potomac River Avenue. We're not on here. The problems that we have are not listed on here. Yet we have had consistent flooding from Potomac River Avenue almost halfway up the street, probably for the last 10 years, for sure.
Longer.
For sure, the
Longer
last
than 10
5
years.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's been a consistent problem. We have complained, we have
Nobody has.
voiced our opinion, and we don't get any response whatsoever from the town. It's, oh, well, it's erosion, it is. We're
Yeah.
becoming a sinkhole, is what we're becoming.
Yeah.
And we are frustrated, extremely frustrated. There is absolutely no response from this town council.
Well,
Hang on, I'll answer that. That's not true. I'm sorry, that's not true. Not only is it not true, we actually had our people go out multiple times and did sites measurements along there. Part of the problem is we don't own all of the little area through there as well. The river is encroaching
We need
on
to
all
talk
of us.
about that
The water
because-
levels continue to rise. The water levels are much higher than they were before. I just had to raise our pier at the marina 15 inches because I've had it since 2006. In 2012, I started going underwater on a regular basis. This is just natural tide.
I
This
get
isn't
it.
even storms.
I get it.
So, I believe Virginia Avenue dead ends into the Potomac River, is that correct? All of those streets down there are gonna have inundation problems. We actually even reached out to the Navy, hoping we could get some, financial assistance from them, since we allow them to use their space for the range stations, and then we can do it, no help whatsoever. So we definitely, I know for at least 6 years I've been on council, this has been brought to our attention. Who's the gentleman?
Marty Long.
Yeah, Marty has brought it to our attention multiple times. I know Rob and his people down here, I believe, as Jeff even has looked at it at some point in time, or the previous people have looked at it as well.
Effort for grant money too.
Yeah, and grant money as well to do it. I know they got, I think you have barriers at the end of your street now.
New Jersey Wall.
Jersey Wall.
It's a
yeah.
Jersey Wall.
Exactly.
It's like a highway.
Yeah, I know, I get it.
The issue with the ownership is pretty clear. I mean, we all have the ownership deed that says who owns it. The first 3 homes from Maryland to Virginia are public. The last 3 are private. We have that, we can share that with you.
Right.
I don't understand why this keeps coming up,
Okay, well,
but we need to talk about it.
yes, ma'am, that's fine, and I think we can certainly do that, but I just want to be clear that we have brought it to our attention. We've looked at it multiple times. We've looked at, I believe, I don't remember how many millions of dollars to remediate the problem was going to be. We were looking at grants, and still are looking for grants. But again, we reached out to the Navy in hopes that they would help us as well.
Army Corps of Engineers
Army
also.
Corps of Engineers as well.
And what was their response? What is the response for getting? Any? Because they didn't respond to me.
So the Navy's response is that they feel like they're going to have to move their stuff actually too because the water rights. We're having such elevated water rights.
We spoke at one time and you said that you had talked to the Navy about some kind of deferment of rent where they would help us with, rather than pay the town, they would put some riprap in, whatever it was.
I had hoped like we had tried to get them to riprap in lieu of them renting the
The town.
town. They don't pay us a lot
It is true. And it's been going on for 10 years, probably 15. Since Isabel, quite honestly.
Yes, since Isabel.
Since Isabel. This is how we all live.
Right.
What you did down at the point, not at
And nobody-
Colonial Avenue where you put the statues, is exactly what I think is needed down there, probably in Maryland and maybe even in Lincoln too. They don't have as much water on those two as we do. Virginia has.
I have to refer that to them, but I don't know.
I can-
This is a draining, it's a draining.
I can speak to that a little bit, and then I'll probably hand it off to Rob and Jeff. But just, I personally have met with the base commander of Dahlgren at least once a year, or twice a year, specifically on this issue. Specifically on the, hey, what can you do? How can you help me? Can you at least give me the right name in DC to call? Can you just, and there is a barrier. Just have to be forthright with you. I've gotten zero traction with it. I'm using right now somebody that, and this, I don't want to get your hopes up, so I'm trying to do expectation management. I've been able to build a relationship with somebody who's worked as a lobbyist with the Army Corps of Engineers in the past. And I think that's the way I'm going to pursue it.
Lobbyists would be great.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. I understand though, again, expectation management, I don't want to, give you an impression, but it hasn't gone away. I'm sorry if it's at sea level at this point. The sea level has risen and there's little we can do, and I think we all know the story of New Orleans and how much money they pump into that, and whoever's been down there, it's still not a good solution. I've lived down there, and they have massive issues with massive money, and sometimes even money doesn't fix problems. New Orleans is one of those. We'll continue to work on it. We're going to continue to look at ways that we can affect your area. For this conversation, though, I think yours is actually unorthodox compared to what the rest of the town experienced just now, because yours is truly tidal. I mean, it's truly tidal. This is stormwater management. It really doesn't deal with tidal as much as it deals with what comes from the sky. But I do hear what you're saying. And please know that with phone calls are being made, we're trying to approach folk. I'm supposed to meet the new commander, because they just had a change of command in Dahlgren. I meet the new commander in September. And again, it's not even within his purview, but he's the conduit to DC. And so we're continuing that effort.
Communication with the neighbors down there and the neighbors.
How do we get information on anything?
We don't know
I
anything.
understand. And one
Very
of,
frustrated.
I can totally appreciate that, and probably one of the reasons why we've heard a little radio silence on our end is because we don't have a solution for you. I'm just being honest. I wish I don't have anything tangible or concrete that I can give you. And when I make that call to you, you saw how hesitant I was to tell you even I was working with a lobbyist, because I'm like, I don't want to give anybody the impression that we got the solution yet. But I do want to raise my hand and acknowledge the problem set. So, thank you.
Well,
Ma'am?
I'm curious of how do we get information from you?
What information do you want?
How do we get updated information on what they want to be done about?
You can either call to the town hall. and talk.
Nobody, I've done that
No.
100 times.
And nobody what?
I sent emails, I called.
You
Nobody
send me an
responds.
email, you send me personally to the mayor, an email that went unanswered. And I'll personally take
I
it.
will.
You send it to me.
I have a lot of it.
I would
A lot of
appreciate it,
it.
because if it goes unanswered, I want to know about it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
One of the ways a lot of people communicate with me, and I know Mr. Kelly has used it before, is not only email, because the relationship evolved where it had to go down to phone calls, but I have what's called a town manager's blog on the website. And that's where people, with any and everything, whether it's something to do with the police or something to do with public works, and they email me a question. And so far, my reaction time has been usually the same week, unless you get me on like a Friday afternoon. I usually make it a point to. It's gotten so fluid to where Maggie Lane, that works the front desk, who's my assistant, has been able to answer some of the things. And occasionally, if you have something very technical or very mathematical, I'll form it off to Public Works, and I know that they don't answer. And there's a place to put your phone number. I make the phone calls when I'm like, gosh, what they're asking me is too hard for email. Let me just make that call, because there's going to be so much more clarity to it if I just call. And I know, Joe, you've experienced that. I don't know if there's others in the room that have used that avenue, but I would offer that to you, because I'm trying to give an outlet. And then with leadership, we discuss often what's the best way people can get to me to ask something operational that's not really council. It's kind of at our level down here. Worst case scenario, come up to town hall. Say, I need to talk to the town manager. I might be an appointment, but they'll take your name and we're going to call you back. I met with 2 citizens today. Meet with a lot of citizens on Monday and throughout the week. I usually average at least almost one a day. Maybe that's a little overzealous, but at least one every other day about their own personal issues. So please.
Hi, my name's Jenny. I live over on Santa Maria, 215. And I found out this property's been before the council quite often. When I moved in and I looked at the culvert in between my neighbor's property and I, my thought was, oh, this is great for my neighbor and I. And maybe we'll get a trickle more. In this last water, and it's been happening, my backyard's been flooding and it's been going over the drainage pipe that it's supposed to go into, I would say, the last 4 minutes. So during this, I needed to go wash my basket, so I went out and I went down the road across the street from me to the corner. And on that corner, there is a drainage pipe that goes across to this side. It's probably gathering water from the street behind it. So it goes down to my side. It comes down all those houses with all their water, and it meets at the corner of my property. So I went, this is interesting. I filmed all this. So then I went across the street the other direction. There's another drainage pipe coming in, comes to the corner of my property. The water that was flowing out of those drainage pipes were still flowing at 10, 11 o'clock at night at a clip. There was nowhere. My property and my neighbor's property is a culvert. Because you can't have a culvert this deep and have all that water, whether it's an inch, 2 inch, or whatever. The other thing is I'm new to the area. I moved from the West Coast. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, why is this all dirt and why is there all this growth? I walk my dogs around. Everything's clogged up. And I'm just like, this just doesn't make sense for a water system. You know, I'm thinking we need drains 10 times as big as what they are. And we need a lot of cement. And some of it needs to be way underground. You can't have all this water coming to the corner of my property. My front yard is sliding into it. A huge portion of it is sliding. And I've only lived here since December. I'm really, I can let you know I'm upset. And I'm dismayed, and I've worked in real estate and construction for a long time. None of it, in looking at it from an outsider, I go, what idiot did this? That's an outsider point of view.
Well, welcome. Welcome. We are glad to have you. But if you don't mind, if you can say your address again, and I'm going to shoot eyes over at one of these folks that is going to be able to answer that because they know the terrain in the meadows.
She called Cindy's house.
There it is. Do you want it or Mike? Or Jeff?
She called Cindy's house.
I think some of it's gonna end up going to Jeff, hopefully,
Yeah.
where we are, but we are aware of, now there is, recently there was an easement attained between your property and the next, and a drainage easement, and there's been water traveling through there for many years from what we can tell from the old days. With the aerial photography that was done and determining the elevations between your outfall and where it ends up is actually one of the things that we will be looking at and hoping to identify over time how we can do it, and if we can do it, as far as making it better. But it is one that we know is designed to a 10-year storm, but you're probably getting a lot more water in there. I don't know if Jeff here has done some preliminary elevations, but then currently it is where it goes. It's going into existing infrastructure. Jeff, can you add anything to it, and what we see we might be able to do in the future?
Well, it's, folks know, I've looked at a lot of drainage problems up here over the years. Some of the drainage problems, like over on Virginia, are a little bit more tidal. They're much more difficult to deal with, unfortunately, because there is sea level rise. I mean, nobody's going to argue with anybody over why it happened, because dinosaurs fell over or something else happened. Meteorites hit somebody. But the proof of the pudding is that when sea level's rising, and when sea level rises, groundwater and surface water coming from inland has to have somewhere to go. Well, if it used to go and fill up a void that was here and now the void's up here, your house didn't go up with it. Neither did those streets, neither did any of that other infrastructure. Much, much more difficult problem to look at, and as Quinn hinted to, you know, you get into, at the ultimate, you get into the multi-hundreds of millions of dollars like New Orleans did, and it still fails. Because as we showed earlier, you end up, you're just battling statistics. And it doesn't take but a few more raindrops, and I know this as an engineer, to just overpower a system. So I can say to you, you could put in 25 horsepower pumps, and guess what? A rain would come, then you would need 30 horsepower pumps. And you just can't build a 100 horsepower pump and just let it run dry 99% of the time just for sitting there at that one. It becomes a very difficult engineering problem. To address your problem over there at Santa Maria, I've walked your backyard, your side yard, the entire back drainage way. If you've ever been back there, as you go towards the river, you'll notice there's a huge tree back there that at some point is going to have to come out. And it only comes out with a tremendous amount of money and a crane and some trucks that have to go back there and get it. But there is a drainage system, there is a pipe network that's been identified that's back behind your house. And it drains a lot of that area because that is where a lot of that neighborhood wants to drain over to. And eventually it gets into a concrete pipe and inlet system, which actually will take it on to the river. And that's one of the spots that we are looking at right now to try to see what it takes to improve basically from the back of your house, because that's the reason why that drainage easement was obtained from the prior owners before you bought it, was to try to figure out, can we somehow get that water to go all the way down, because the idea of the easement was that maybe at some point in the future we actually put a pipe in it and close it up so you don't actually see an open ditch anymore. But what happens with water is if I don't have an endpoint, what you obviously can see is that it just creates another logjam or a spot where I can't push water through water. And the only way water works in draining is this in the back has to be higher in the front, and it'll push towards the front. And that's really what you've got. The plastic piping system that is immediately behind your house, in my opinion, at some point in the near future will probably need replaced. And once the tree is out of the way and once the path is clear, because I don't know if you've gone back there and looked, it's twisty to say the least. And you can probably see it. You see pieces of pipe and you see pieces of open ditch. And then it goes right back into a pipe again. Well, that's just the evolution of where things work. But yours is one that's known about. The Virginia Street is, that's been known about for a long time, but again, that's probably a solution. More than likely it's going to have to come from the riverside and come from the inland side. It is now with the advent of this topography that, I mean, we have literally 1 foot topography that was flown from Colonial Avenue, 1st Street area all the way to the north end of town. Now we can actually truly start to see who was draining to who. Where a little bit of that in this real flat land, and even myself as an engineer and surveyor, I've had a hard time trying to determine which way things are actually flowing. And trust me, I've been up here when it's raining and put little pieces of paper in the water just to see which way it's going, just because it's just not that obvious. But now we're starting to get to technology where I think a few of those parts are gonna start to come together. But there's a known system behind you. It worked for a number of years here, because that system is old, that's back there. But what's happening is you've got a little bit more development in this town now than you had, say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago when it was put in. All the lots are small, so there is no real stormwater management on these lots, just as Quinn alluded to over here at Torrey Smith Park. There's more money in the stormwater than there is in the literal park improvements. And that's a tough thing to say, but that's how the world is going at this point. But you can tell that you don't see the runoff, radical runoff, from that as you do in a normal rain now. You put 5 inches of rain on, everything's off. You know, it's gonna go where it goes. The other thing you gotta remember that's happened, and I'm looking at a basement that's flooding down the town of Warsaw for a lady right now. It's never flooded in 7 years, but all of a sudden it started in August. Well, what is August? The highest rainfall on record in this area for August. That's tough statistics to have to work against, but your situation is well known now.
And you're talking, I'm sitting here, and I thought about this before I even got here, is the city is using my property as a culvert for drainage water, because they have purposely chosen to have water from other properties come to mine. It was this high above my backyard. And there was nowhere else to go from it, and I took pictures and I looked at it, and it was primarily towards the back where it was this high over the height. And I'm going, unless something is done soon, it's gonna get worse. I shouldn't have to start paying to regrade my property and move all that land back up that's mine, because the city wants to use my property as a floodgate. Where do you come up with priorities and immediacy in these problems?
I'll say something real quick. I was just gonna say, if you had seen that property 2 years ago,
Yes.
you couldn't walk from the street to your house to get to your steps. You couldn't come out of your front door.
Well, I can't go out my back door.
You couldn't come out your front door. So it sounds to me like you made a little bit of headway in what we did. I mean, we spent a lot of time with those neighbors there. We had to go through the whole, getting a piece of property, had to go through the planning commission, had to go through the whole 9 yards. I mean, we spent over a year in that development process there. At a considerable cost, quite frankly. We're not afraid of the cost because we felt like we were doing the right thing. I'm glad that it was there for this rain, because I'm not quite sure what would have happened, quite frankly. Because we went through Lee where we had 18 inches of rain in 24 hours, and that didn't inundate the meadows like this did, because I was there for it. So, but I guess the point I'm trying to make to you is that your property not only is it a beautiful piece of property, but it has some special challenges for the town. And the town reached out and tried to mitigate the challenges and mitigate any forward, any more flooding on your property. I hope that a regular rain, you're not going to experience what you experienced the other night. I don't think you will, quite frankly. But you are in a special circumstance, quite frankly, you are right now. And I think what the engineer just said, what Howard just said, is that they're going to look and mitigating it further through that back area. So I believe, isn't that where Bluff Point backs up to that?
Yes.
Same
Yeah, that's where Bluff Point hits Riverside Meadows.
So, and I will say this, I'm going to tell you right now, in 1985, I bought a lot there on the corner of Azalea and Riverview Drive. And I rode on motorcycles up there, I had dirt bikes. And, you know, Tim will tell you, he's lived here his whole life. A lot of it was swamp. Quite frankly, it was swamp up there. They built it on swamp. I didn't build it on swamp. Nobody in this room built it on swamp. As you see, there's a lot of start and stop with the sidewalks and the curbs and the gutters. Right?
DC was built in swamp.
It went broke. The company went broke that had it. It was purchased by, I think, several different iterations of developers over time. It never got what it was due. It was never done, in my opinion, in a professional development layout. I don't want to speak on behalf of the engineer, but a little bit of developments. So we're fighting every day. Plus, I'm gonna say this may not be popular, but I'm not running it, so it's okay. Every time you build a house there, you increase the water issue. Every single time we build a home in Columbia Beach, we increase the water problems. All right. So, a lot of folks have been able to build pretty much at will, and we really haven't, stuck the knife in on this stormwater issues around town. But as we continue to build, it's starting to show its face right now. It's going to require that we do more, and it may become more expensive for a homestead. I would suspect that's going to happen at some level.
And I'm glad you brought us to that point, Mr. Mayor. The mayor's right. Anytime you add impervious over a certain thing, then you're going to have more. That being said, we're not operating under those 1960 standards. So if you come to the Planning Commission with a new build, you have somebody, Mr. Howarth, who is responsible for looking at what you want to build to ensure that the property is going to be no worse off and the runoff is going to be no worse off. So we have those regulations in place now to combat that, but unfortunately we can't go back in time. Your property that you're speaking with, I was intimately involved with that. To where we had to request an easement and have actual land ownership change hands to get the ditch that you have in place. It was pretty monumental from a process standpoint, but we're not done. We're not done. I don't want you to think that it was a check the block and it's over with. We have a lot of competing priorities in town, and we got kind of hit over the head one day, and that is what it is. But I want to leave you with the understanding that we're not done back there. The mention of the tree, we know that the current infrastructure, whatever that is archaic. It needs to be updated, and everything does cost money. But it's not stopping us moving forward, and that's why I have gray hair due to budget season, because there's always more issues than we have money for. Knowing that we have no desire to raise taxes. So let me just say that up front. I don't want to scare anybody in thinking or scuttlebutt to go through the town that we're going to raise taxes. That's nobody's desire. But we're going to work with what we have and tackle these problems.
Where I come from in construction lending, when you end up with things like this, the cost gets borne by the new builds. And there's a plan set out, so that water is definitely going to have a culvert and a pipe going somewhere else that's not feeding into what already exists. And they have to live with that.
On massive developments, that is kind of the standard quo on how things are done. But individual lots, so your neighborhood is frankly kind of built out already, right? So you might have 1, 2 lots here that wouldn't fall under a subdivision type building.
Well, the other thing I would add too, because you made an interesting comment about the rights of where water goes and whether it should go across that property or whether that easement was acquired. If you look back even from the town plat and a whole bunch of the much newer plats, there are drainage easements littered across all of these subdivision lots. I'll guarantee you some other people sitting in this room have them on their lots. They were designed because we are surface drainage. We don't have the height above the Potomac River to get a lot of pipe infrastructure in, like what California may have had from where you were. And where they didn't, you've got those big, monumental concrete ducts that run all sorts of drainage out of cities and whatnot. What you've got is the miniature version of that, but there's several more of them up in that area, and that's really one of the things that this GIS system is going to help us do. Is it's going to help us look at where these things are, where drainage is actually trying to go. And I think what you guys have just said is correct. I think there is, at some point in the future, stormwater will have to be borne on the person doing the building. And of course, as we just know in the Torrey Smith Park, it's very expensive to bear that. Now the tricky question becomes is what do you do on lots that are already platted that this town has a whole bunch of? Who bears that cost at that point? Because those are already actually set up And at the size they are, there's really not much, even me as an engineering surveyor can actually do to contain stormwater just on that lot, even up to the 10-year storm mark, much less, things that we saw in rainfall. But to help you finalize that thought, we've been talking for months about, areas that can be utilized for stormwater management, and that is the very next step where things are going as part of this evolution of this process to get you there. So they are kind of using your property, but the thought of using your property is that's where the water typically went. Even as an engineer, and I'm a crafty one, to say the least, I can't make water go where it doesn't want to go long term. I might be able to defeat it short term, but it's going to find its, if you're in construction, water's going to find its way back at where it wants to be. And I can play every trick on it that I can play, hardening ditch lines and everything else in the world at expensive cost, and I'll only defer it. I won't ever defeat it, as it were. But your point is well taken about that.
Real quick, I'd like to add on that, add a great segment, Mr. Howard. So, even on Classic Shores, as you know, there's a lot of empty lots up there. And there's been some discussion about building some on some of that property, but that discussion has only been become a discussion because that they're considered to use retention ponds for stormwater. And the retention ponds would actually be incorporated into a park kind of thing. So you'll have a park setting with a retention pond kind of thing. That way we won't have these issues moving forward instead of kicking the can down the road, which happened, and there's nobody here going for that. It happened so many years ago. But moving forward, the town's got to think about that, and we have put that into effect. The planning commission is also very aware of it. They've met, our officials have met, and I think they're pretty much a consensus now moving forward. The days of just locking a house down without considering remediation of the stormwater and other factors are pretty much out the door. We're going to look at each and every aspect of it. Unfortunately, what's already built in place, we're going to have issues with until we firm up some of these fixes to it.
I was looking over this here, citizens' activities that have impacted.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, is there any kind of enforcement against these people when they do this? When they throw gravel in it, when they plant bushes, does anybody go up to them and say, remove it?
Absolutely.
I'm just asking.
Absolutely. No, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. 9 times out of 10, when somebody does this, they don't do it out of malice. They don't do it intentionally. They just didn't know. And so we do go to them, but here's the problem. We have 51, 52 miles of road. When do we identify these things, right? So I don't identify them in July the 6th when it's sunny. We identify when we have 2 or 3 foot of water, and we're saying, oh dear Lord, what happened? And Mr. Groves is down there with his team, and they're at 8 o'clock at night, and then we find out why it happened, and then of course we go approach them.
Well, I'm talking about just when the public works or whoever is out and about, and they see somebody planting bushes, and they go there and say, hey, you need to remove those bushes.
Yes, sir.
They do.
Yes, sir.
Culverts, they'll remove the culverts, they'll remove.
Then
we
you're
do.
down and you gotta get a permit to put the culvert in. They tell you what size to put in. I mean, it's.
And some people go Lone Ranger. That's the term I use up in town hall. Some people go Lone Ranger and they just do it. And meanwhile, the ones that even get the concrete culvert, unfortunately, they don't understand that elevation of that concrete is so critical. And Mike will go out there and convey and kind of educate them on, hey, look, your theory is not bad. It just needed to be 6 foot or 6 inches down because you're going to get water and then the mosquitoes and
Well,
what
that's
have
what
you.
I'm asking. Are they required to get a permit before they?
Yes, sir. Before they do anything in the right of way.
Yes,
sir.
they're supposed to. But keep in mind some of this stuff, I'm talking about it happened 30 years ago.
Okay.
And we're going back to try and reclaim a drainage area, and you discover that it was filled, and there were culverts there before, and they've covered it, it's been covered up. But no blame, but it's happened over. I'm not talking that they're doing it today. Obviously, when we see it today, and if somebody's doing that, we will go talk to them. But a lot of what we find is when we're going back
One other
and
thing I'd like
reclaiming.
to bring up. The 2 lots across the street from my house sold. I met one of the people that bought one of those lots. They're planning on building a house on it. Okay. There is no drainage There's no drainage ditch on my side of the road. So when the water runs off the road, it runs into my front yard, because there's no place else for it to go. There's not even a ditch there.
There's several back sort of a bunch of places that make this.
I mean, it's,
Another one of the things that we run into is, this is kind of, it's a good thing from one standpoint, and not so good from others, but
I did one of the POs that you asked, and I went on, and I did the PO, and somebody came and talked to my wife Michelle, and said that they didn't have the budget to fix the sidewalk. Joe's wife actually tripped on the sidewalk in front of my house. And the sidewalks need to be dealt with, the puddling needs to be dealt with. I mean, I'm right on the main road, and we've had so many people.
I thought I saw that working in front of your house this week.
They were working.
Mike, I'll let you. Mike.
We were in the 800.
Yeah.
Mr. Groves, I do hear you. I do have a success story today that unfortunately isn't at your address, but tackled the exact problem that you have or that you just described today. And Mr. Groves was actually in charge of that project, so I'll just kind of explain how we try, or what we want to do in the future to kind of get after this.
We did some work in the 800 block of Irving. Basically what we did, we were fortunate there was already an invert there crossing the road. What was going on there is it had become so compacted, the ground wasn't absorbing any water to carry it to this one little invert. So we were able to undercut it, put some stone there to get that drained. I'll come down to the 500 block and look at your house, see if there's something that we can do. The sidewalk issue, until council directs us to all of a sudden start putting in sidewalk, where would it ever stop? If we put it in at your house, we gotta do your neighbor's house, and it will, it's many a mile that would never stop, so. But I'll be glad to come down and look and see if there's something we can do on the drainage at your house, man. 500 Irving?
525.
Excuse me?
525.
Thank you.
Can I say something real quick?
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to say, so, what I have asked them to do and have for the last 4 years, and 2 years previous to that when I was vice mayor, is don't promise you something that we're not going to deliver, quite frankly. I think if all of our politicians study you enough, or you see it enough, they promise you all kinds of things. We're not going to promise you anything. My preference is always to give you the worst case scenario and deliver the best, right? So, sidewalks, I can just tell you right now, we don't have the millions of dollars that it would take to fix the sidewalks. So what have we done? We've ordered signage to go on Irving Avenue for walkers and bicyclists to use Irving Avenue to walk against traffic. We want you facing the traffic when you walk, because we don't want people to get hit from behind. You got earphones in, you don't hear the car coming. People aren't paying attention, they're looking at the swans or whatever they're running over. At least if they're facing you, you got a fighting chance to jump out of the way. So that's our immediate fix to the sidewalks. Right there. I stand up here and tell you that we're gonna give you sidewalks, or we're gonna try to give you sidewalks. That's just a lie. It's not gonna happen unless we get this council to agree to raise taxes by a tremendous amount of money, and we have a lot of other needs that are, believe it or not, a lot more important. I wouldn't want Natalie to fall anywhere, trip fall anywhere. Those sidewalks are dangerous. Everybody here that knows, they see you running and walking all the time. I don't use the sidewalk at all. So even as a kid, in the 70s and late 60s, those sidewalks were extremely dangerous. You couldn't ride a bike on them. They were 3 inches up. You tripped and fell. If you had flip-flops on, you were toast.
That's very sad. There's 2 places I live, one where I grew up. The sidewalks were the responsibility of the homeowner, not the town. And I can remember my dad getting fined for not repairing the sidewalks.
We mentioned that. We mentioned that. Even to get people, because by law, you are required to remove the snow from one side.
Right.
We do require that. But we mentioned about having each individual homeowner coming up and cost of having done. It's never gone very well.
Well, no, it never does, but.
Now, the great thing is, and thank you for bringing that up, because that's something that always crops up on social media, and it has to be said out loud. And the great thing about it is I'm going to kind of promote the ladies and gentlemen behind me here. One of their topics tonight, if I ever stop talking and they don't start throwing staplers at me, is to talk about the sidewalks and what they're going to recommend to council, and kind of how that discussion can start. So you're in the right place at the right time with the right people. You just got me in your way at this point, so I apologize for that. But you've been very patient back there, both of you. Thank you.
You telling people to walk towards the cars?
Yes.
I did that in a bicycle last year and pulled over my bike, bicycle that's.
Well, they didn't know what they were talking about. We're putting signs out and we're gonna ask people.
She wants to walk with the helmet.
Yes, sir. Again, one last question, but I went to the planning commission that was so nice to us to let them share with you stuff like the sidewalks. They've got great topics coming up. So, sir, you raise your hand, and then if it's okay, I'll just kind of shut it down.
Who has liability if somebody does trip on a sidewalk and breaks their arm?
Municipalities, and this is coming, I don't have legal representation here, but I've had this discussion with our previous town attorney, and he was a wealth of knowledge. I really miss him. Mr. Cuomo was a mentor to me. The town enjoys somewhat of a sovereign immunity when it comes to lawsuits of natures like that. So it's not really a legal issue for us. I say that with the understanding that there's an exception to every rule. So,
I think to make it a legal issue for the town, I don't think it would be.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
If you make it a legal issue for the homeowner, then he'll take care of his sidewalk so people don't trip on it.
Agreed, and I don't disagree with that methodology or that mechanic can exist. What I'm very reluctant to do, because we live in a world that when somebody makes a paycheck, what they get home versus what they got home 40 years ago is a fraction. So your buying power is so small, and we do have high taxes. The last thing I want to do is really encumber tax-paying citizens with just one more bill. You're right, the mechanic probably exists. But I know that the citizens, I live in town, I know what these taxes are. They're high, and I really don't want to labor anybody else. Thank you.
They said one little thing. They were on, I live in Truman Vernon, and the house next to mine, the town came down and removed a dead tree this week. So they took out the sidewalk.
On Vernon Street.
Yeah,
Yes.
between our house and the dead tree, they took it out. They dug up the sidewalk and took it away, and now there's a mud pack there. So, are they coming back to put the sidewalk in, they just took out?
Mike, you want the mic?
I am unaware of any mud patch being there.
Well, it hasn't rained yet, but it'll be bad because.
Okay, so there is a drainage there, so I'm hoping there's not a mud patch there. I spoke to the homeowner. They're planning on seeding that area. So we prepped it for them, and we're going to keep an eye on it. They're planning on doing some seeding, and I'm sure putting some straw down. So I didn't want to mess them up.
I live right next door,
Right.
and I was over there, I've had my house for 18 years, and I don't spend I never spend every week here, but now because of COVID, I can work from my house here. So I saw that, and I saw concrete being dug up from the sidewalk.
This-
And I just looked, and there's dirt.
Right.
I mean,
That particular area,
because there's a drain on the other side of their house,
yes.
and now it's just like all filled in across. I don't know if it'd be an issue with my house.
Yeah, well, it was actually,
That's
yes,
my water.
it was humped trying to get to that drain.
Oh, I know my
We
house
cut
is-
that out.
The tree is, it's terrible.
We cut that out. The tree was dead,
Oh,
for
dead.
sure. And, we were afraid limbs were gonna fall. The sidewalk, that was preached up, some areas about 6 inches. It was a definite hazard.
Absolutely.
And that area, I told them, if they asked for a new sidewalk, not gonna happen. I can remove the sidewalk, put some gravel. I would recommend some grass. They went for the grass, so.
Okay.
Hopefully, there's no big mud puddle there. You made me nervous on that.
Well, we'll see when the next rain, I'll be here for a while, so we'll see.
Well, in closing, I would like to thank everyone for coming out. Can you catch me after this? Because they're seriously gonna start throwing stuff at me. And I'll stay and I'll speak with you. But, thank you all for speaking with the staff. This helps us so much to hear from you. And it also gives us a chance to really communicate and let you guys know what we're doing behind the scenes that we don't get to talk about in town council meetings because it's not appropriate. But the more I can share with you and the more I gain from you, the faster we're going to get after these problems. So when you see me around, I kind of stick out in the crowd, stop me, talk to me. That's what I'm here for. Come by town hall. I want to address everything that we can, and then some things that are bigger than I can take care of at my level, I naturally bring it up to the town leadership, so they're aware of it. But I want to thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank the mayor and also you, Mr. Robertson, for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Very helpful. I think it was very much needed. I did want to do a quick poll for people that are in the audience here. Is anyone here to speak on the RV park there at Eleanor Park? If you are, raise your hand. Just wanted to tell you that the commission has already voted against that RV park. We did that last week, so I just wanted to share that. As it is. It's moving forward as it was discussed at the town council meeting. But we didn't consider that. We were just asked to look at the RV park.
So we need to talk this year about the playground.
Well, we don't have that on the agenda, but we do have coming up public comment, and you're welcome to stay for that. But in the interim, we're going to take a 5-minute break. So we're going to take a 5-minute break for now, and then we'll resume.
side. And so they drive probably, to ride around that beautiful point, which is getting covered by a parking lot. They ride around that beautiful point and they go to the Castlewood Park. So they have to pass two other parks, Washington and Torrey Smith Park, to even get to us. So there's the park really, I thought the playground is a total waste of money. So that's basically the green space. And then just a couple more things. Park accessibility, I already talked about the streets and the danger there. The town's gonna have, the planning commission or whoever does this is gonna have to consider, how are people gonna get to this new park, this new playground? Irving Avenue is the main entrance, so if kids wanna go there, they're gonna have to walk down that street. There is no other parking. And the town also, one thing to consider when I talked about the ground disturbance, is the town, when they laid it out in their plan to sell the park to the council, they said that we're only gonna disturb 2,500 square feet. But they used supposedly the existing driveway as the entrance and supposedly parking. I'm not sure how you park on an old driveway. But that basically sections off 50% of that park. So 50% of Eleanor Park is actually going to be committed in the town's plan, which is 13 times what the town originally said when they said they were only going to use 2,500 square feet of Eleanor Park. And finally, I've talked to a lot of my neighbors that live right in that area. Many of them have been bringing their kids there for generations. My neighbor, I won't say her age, but her mother took her there. Her mother's in her 80s or 90s. Her mother took her there as a kid. So, and I talked to another neighbor. She said that she's taken her little son there. Well, her mother took her, and her mother took her mother, and her mother took his mother's mother. So I will mention too that there's a wellhead over there, so there may be some EPA issues. The town's already extended that parking lot probably to more than the max. I'm not sure. We're still trying to figure out whether it's legitimate to actually put that another 10,000 square feet of parking lot over there in the Bay Area where we're going to have potentially water runoff and drainage issues.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Williams, for your testimony there, and to remind you once again that the Planning Commission is not going to be deciding that. That was voted on by the Town Council. That's Resolution 2920. Mm-hmm. So we won't have a say in that, but I do appreciate you sharing that with us.
You don't get any say in a park going into this town?
We don't have, that is not before us, no. So we'll ask for the next speaker.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Just in closing, thank you for your time, I appreciate it. And since you're on the planning committee, I would urge you to suggest to the council that a comprehensive plan for Eleanor Park and what they're going to do to historic Castlewood Park would be greatly appreciated by the people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And our next speaker?
Paige Williams. Sorry, Paige Williams.
Yeah, just so you know, the town council actually told us to come to this to discuss this.
Yeah, my name is Paige Williams, and
Paige, I just wanted to let you and other speakers know you have 5 minutes.
Okay, I just have one thing to say.
Sure.
That, just what he said. That's it. And that Westmoreland County, which I believe we are in Westmoreland County, I know we're Little Colonial Beach, but we are still Westmoreland County, and that's what I wanted to say, what he said. It requires a public hearing, and we basically came to speak so our stuff could be seen and heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker?
Lisette Montalvo.
Hi.
Hello.
Again, I'm not going to talk too much about Eleanor Park itself and why I oppose, because Mr. Williams did a great job. Plus we have 20 other people that are against. in an ungodly hour, just 1 hour, ungodly time. There was almost no one in the house. Then we went neighbor by neighbor across the park, and we got almost everybody to sign against that. And there are reasons for that. So the first thing I'm going to tell you, let's talk then about a little bit about the park, but what is the big deal here? It's related to what he talked. When we go to Irving Avenue, I'm going to talk to you as a person. When we go to Irving, I live in Irving Avenue, and there are a lot of cars that park in front of my house, or they park in a motel too, and then they go to the beach, correct? So you tell these people, look, you cannot park there. And the people get very aggressive. There was an incident last year where the person actually parked in front of my house, and we told them, look, you cannot park there. We were actually there in the yard, and he came into our house, and he was threatening us. He put his hand here, and we didn't know if he had a concealed weapon or not. The police came, we didn't press charges, but nobody should be threatening their house. And having that park will increase the level of threats and the level of problems that we are having right now in our area. And this is specifically on the South Beach. With that being said, he mentioned about the parking, so I'm not going to talk about that. But we also have the flooding problem. And Eleanor Park, two drops, that's all it takes for it to become a swamp. And I know because I live there and we use the park. And two little drops of rain actually create a swamp there. The playground, hitting a NEPA for the amount of money. With that being said, if the planning commission, if the town voted to pass this resolution, understanding that all the things that needs to go into build that park, the town is failing the people, but more important, the planning commission is failing the people. And the reason you're all failing the people is because you don't have a comprehensive plan, you didn't seek input, and you didn't provide all the necessary guidance to the town and council, so they didn't approve that park. That's why you're here. That's why you have the trust of us, because you defend us. And the park is nowhere, the playground is not there. So my plea to all of you, as responsible citizens and members of this council of this planning commission, is stop the development of that park and do it right. We have the right to a NEPA study. That's per law. The second part is, let's plan something there that makes sense. Talk to the people. Don't spend $10,000 per kid. Talk to the people. We have so many amazing ideas every time that we talk about this. We may not be able to do them, all of them. We may be able to do one, but most of the people here in Colonial Beach there are only 800 kids according to the new census. And I know the numbers are not final, but they expect that the playground. And I have to tell you, most of those kids live over there, 9 kids over here, and we have a lot of elderly people. And when I say elderly people, it's about 65. I'm not there yet, but I will get there very soon. And then we have also the younger generation. Why don't build something for families? Why don't build something that people that are over 65 will use? And finally, the lack of planning, when he was talking about the drainage, that has to be part of the plan of this town. That has to be a priority. Sea levels are rising. We cannot stop that. But we can stop how we manage. Last year, I went to the Netherlands. Not 2 years ago. I went to the Netherlands, and it's amazing. They're 2 feet over sea level, and they have reclaimed a lot of land from the sea. And I have to tell you that they have the best water management system ever. And they can do it. I know that in the Netherlands there are some problems because they are changing the way they do, but they still can do it. Their land is most of it, 50% at least, reclaimed from the sea. So us to stop the water is nothing. And the last part I wanted to say is plans are important. It gives us a north. Help us to seek funding. Help us to understand where we are going as a town. Preserve the identity of the town and the people. And I want to give you an example. I went to St. Petersburg in Russia. That was a planned city by the Tsars. The Tsars and the buildings that they did and the way that they used the Nerva River and everything, that was amazing. It's beautiful. Then communists came and saw the plans and started building great boxes. And it's horrible. The city is a disaster. And the residents are unhappy. And everybody is unhappy. And I have to tell you, one of the things I want to say is, don't be like Russia here, telling us what we need. We are America. We are better.
Dr. Montalvo, I want to thank you for your testimony. Do we have more speakers?
Dan Armstrong? Jennifer Long?
I understand you aren't planning the parks, and that's what that's kind of what I'm here for. I signed up, but I agree with them. I live, and as I said, you just said here tonight, my kids are grown. They played up in that park when they were small, and they're grown. But I have grandchildren now. But as the mayor just said, oh, don't ride your bikes on the sidewalks. Walk. And you're putting a park. You have that huge tennis court right over here with the basketball court and a playground. Plus you have the park there, then you have the park down here, and you can't even open them. With this COVID, you can't even get people to staff them to open them. What would you build another park? If there was going to be another playground built, it should be on the other side of town where they don't. And that's all as I've lived here, I've had my house here for 18 years. And my kids grew up in this town. So, you'd like to see with the infrastructure, they need to be working on sidewalks and stuff like that. So the kids can ride their bikes because you don't want them riding in the street.
Thank you, Ms. Long.
Shannon Kelly? Mary Lynch? Eileen Joyce Heath? And John Heath. Okay.
All right, with that being said, we are going to close public comment at this time. And next, we are going to hear from our applicant for the Beachgate conditional use permit. Will the applicants please come forward? I just wanted to say that you have 5 minutes to make your presentation, and any of the other speakers that are going to speak on the matter also have 5.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and Commission members, my name is Richard Street. I'm representing Mr. Vijay Patel, who's actually here with me this evening, if we have any questions of him. The project site has been around since the 50s. And it has gone through many transitions, some good, some bad. And Vijay Patel purchased the property to try to bring it back to its former glory of being one of the better inns to stay at. Families would go there from miles around. My brothers actually reminded me that my parents and I stayed there, and all the kids. The kids were crammed in one room, so it's 5 of us in one bed. And my mom and dad had another room, but we stayed at that hotel, or that inn. And VJ actually stayed there too for a while. I came from Fredericksburg, and VJ was up near Port Royal when they came to visit. The hotel or motel or inn has actually degraded quite a bit, shall we say. And we're concerned, we want to bring the vitality back, or Patel wants to bring the vitality back, and the income back, to where the weekend people who want to visit will actually have a good place to stay, quality place to stay, and be able to bring their kids and let them come see Colonial Beach as we used to see it as a kid. Now, some of the items, this is the structure now as it is, and what you see is the hotel or inn itself, and then the shed that's in the back. The as-built survey, this one was actually done in 2016, 2017 when the other conditional use permit was re-upped. And if you hit the button again, we notice that there's pavement, so there's rigid area, structure, impervious surface there. And then if you hit it again, the gravel that's existing. Now, it's questionable as to whether the gravel will work like that. I actually think it's a little bigger, but we have not had a field survey done yet. We are getting ready to, once we get the status of the conditional use permit. If you hit the key again. This was a plan that was approved with the conditional use permit, and it showed 28 parking spaces. Granted, they have the space there for it. And at that time, it was going to be 23 units, which it originally was designed for, with 5 spaces for employees. Mr. Patel came in and said, nah, he didn't like that. So he's dropping it down to 23 units. Actually 20 units. And with that, if you go to the next slide, what we're planning or proposing is straightening out the paved area, take it up to 2 required handicap spaces for the hotel. And then you will have 20 parking spaces, 1 for each unit, including the 2 handicap spaces. And then you'll have the 5 spaces in red for the employees and staff. Now, if you will go ahead and hit the button, that's the proposed paved area. So you'll go up to the handicap area, which will be painted and everything for just handicapped vehicles. One is a van, the other is a regular car. If you hit the key again. The green space, we're actually taking some of the old parking spaces and putting it back to green space, to grass. Now, the last feature we're going to do is that gravel area. The gravel area is going to remain gravel. However, we're going to make it better site design. We're going to use low impact development techniques, and what we're going to do is pull out the gravel. We're going to basically aerate the soil and then come back in with gravel with some form of low impact development technique. It could be something as simple as laying down sand and the geotech fabric over it to where the water will filter right back into the ground as it had done years ago when it was first built. That gives it basically a permeable area that the stormwater will run to at all times. So it's on-site stormwater management. And with this site and looking at the soils information that I could gather from the soils books from USDA, this soil is permeable, as probably most of the soils are, if it's aerated appropriately. If you hit the button again, these are the required parking spaces, and of course there's 18 there, but what we have are the 2 extra handicap spaces. I wanted to maintain that they were being paved. And if you hit the button again, these are the parking spaces for the employees. Now, if you look at next to the number 3 spaces of parking, in between the 3 spaces and the handicap parking, there's a darker green space. That green space is actually, if you remember the motel or the inn, that's almost where the office is, the original office. That original office is going to maintain for storage, and also it's where like the fire alarm system and everything else is going to be placed, mechanical is going to be there. The actual office is going to be down by the green space in the corner there, and that's where those 2 spaces is, one for registration and the other one for a manager or employee that's actually living there, or working there, I should say. 3 units that were in that corner there are going to be combined into the new office. So you're taking out 3 units to create an office, and you're maintaining the original office, but it's going to be called, the space is going to be for storage and for mechanical issues and items. The other item up there at the top, and it's like a tan item, and I know it never looks right on a PowerPoint presentation. That's the relocation of the shed from where it is now, which is under where the 3 red spaces are, to up where the old tree died, and it's just needs to be removed. Mr. Patel is ready to prepare landscaping plans and whatnot for the site. The main items he's going to do is take those old planters, which there were several you could see, but one had a plant in it, an actual plant. So another one had grass in it, the rest are just dead vegetation. He wants to reestablish it, and he doesn't know exactly what he wants to plant there. He says it's basically going to be up to his wife, because she'll tell him what she wants. The playground area, the former playground area, the fence will be removed. We're going to try and just make sure that that's vegetated and maintains vegetation. The old concrete walkway that was in there will be removed, and it'll be partially under the new gravel that'll be porous or permeable to allow the water to soak back in. So with this design as proposed, we're trying to make sure that the site will maintain the 20 units with 20 parking spaces as required, have the 5 for the employees and 1, of course, well, 4 for the employees and 1 we're going to use for the registration. And then, of course, 1 for maintenance if needed for that former office that will now be the mechanical and storage, so that they can still get in and out. The way it's proposed, the asphalt will increase only by the spaces of the handicap area, but the way that it's going to be designed is all the stormwater will run off either into grass or into receiving gravel, porous material, so that nothing will leave the site. And if you look at it, the low spot on that site is actually right in front of the 3 parking spaces, and it just sits there. The water just sits there and puddles. That won't happen. If necessary, we are prepared to even come up with landscaping plans around it. Mr. Patel was even suggesting he wanted to place a board fence along the western side, which is now the white and red chain link fence that has the slats put through it. Up at the front, some suggestions were made to remove the old barriers that were landscaping at one point, but basically fell apart over the years. He could replace them, or he could leave them alone, take them out and just leave it with the big trees we've got there, as many of them that are still alive. I was happy to see that those 2 right next to that driveway are really look good. I was surprised, because after 53, or since it was 53 years, or 1953 when it first opened, those trees have done well, and they've lasted through several big storms that you guys have had down here. But basically, that's what we're proposing, and there was no other items I believe that I had. Yeah, because I hit the highlights. Now, Mr. Patel, is there anything else you wanted to add?
The color, whatever the color they want, we'll be glad to do it.
Yeah, whatever color you want it painted, we'll be glad to do it. As long as it's not rainbow stripe or something, or peppermint patty, we don't want that.
All right, so now we're going to open it up for discussion and ask that if commission members have questions of Mr. Street. Yes, Murray.
Your design looks very nice. Are you familiar with the conditional use permit requirements that were set a few years ago for the same building?
Yes, ma'am, and I didn't see where almost any of it was done.
None of it was.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
And that's my question to you. My first concern would be the beautification of the property, because you are on the main street of our town.
That's our concern too.
Okay. My second concern is the fact that how do we protect or keep it safe from problems that we've experienced in the past, where we had long-term people staying there and they were living there, actually living there, and that's not the meaning of inn or motel.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, these are stipulations Because we did have some crime that existed there.
Yes.
So how are you going to address those?
Well, it'll be basically up to the manager and the staff that are on site to help make certain that that's policed. According to the state regulations, there's a minimum amount of time that a person can stay, and there's a maximum amount of time. He has to follow the state code, okay, accordingly. Now, at any given time, what the scary part is what's happened in the past is state police can bring somebody and say, let this person stay here overnight because he was driving under the influence. And the state pays for it. And they don't have to, they can go anywhere. They can actually do it for Holiday Inn, they can do it for, too close, okay, sorry. They can do it anywhere. Mr. Patel, though, for instance, up in Spotsylvania, took an old hotel that had the same issues. He either had people living there that were hired by him, primarily the manager, or were more or less service oriented. So in other words, when these trucks come in to cut the now, before they wouldn't, and it was full of drug dealers, everything you don't want. Mm-hmm. In less than a year, he cleared out the place. The sheriff's deputies all came in and said, thank you. And he even got to the point where right now I'm helping him with a landscaping plan that clears out the back so that he can basically landscape it, create a trail system, and have a beautiful area for his guests. And they can walk their dogs, things like that. As soon as he cleared the trees out, all the homeless people that were living in his backyard that he never knew left. And with him cleaning it up, the snakes are gone. So many things have occurred, and every place that I've seen that I've gone to one of his hotels that he's taken over, he has fixed them and brought them back up to a better standard than was there before. Now, he's had issues with neighbors that would simply, for instance, clear their property without a permit, and then place a BMP not approved or designed or anything by the county, and then discharge it directly into his property. And that's part of what we're trying to fix now, is how his property got so damaged. We're fixing it. At the same time, the sheriff's deputies came up and told me, this is the best thing that's ever happened to this area, because he fixed it. And that's what he's been known to do whenever he goes into a project, a gas station, anything where they've had issues like that.
Thank you. I have a question about some of the properties that Mr. Patel has. Can you give me some names of them and where they're located and their size?
Well, the one I know about is the Sleep Inn.
No?
Sure.
Regionally, actually, I'm from Port Royal, and I'm a frequent visitor to Colonial Beach, but I haven't been to Colonial Beach for over 30 years. I used to visit Wilkerson Restaurant all the time, but that's past. We've developed properties that were shut down, totally shut down, just like the Beach Gate. I started from gas stations in Jeff Davis Highway, several gas stations on Jeff Davis Highway, which is still with us. Then we also had the Howard Johnson on Route 17 Warrenton Road, which was totally shut down. We bought it, renovated it, got it up, sold it. I built a property on Warrenton Road, the Silver Value Inn, the same thing. I bought the Present Motel, 180 rooms, 10 acres, developed it, still keeping it, and I get offers every day to buy. Some people coming to buy. I bought property in Georgia, where we've developed it, tore down property, we develop it, get it cleaned up, and do things with it, and get it straight and get things. The thing that I'm very anti is bad activity. I have kids, I don't want bad influence on anybody else. But my intention is to make sure the property is clean. We clean it up. I think once we get this Beach Gate in, you'll be so pleased with the landscaping, the painting, because my wife is very cautious about landscaping. We spend more money on landscaping than sometimes for dinner plates for us. So I can assure you we'll keep it clean. Regarding trash, I don't think you or I, like these people here just mentioned, people are going to come to your parking lot, going to do trash. You can't control that. Neither can I. We will do our best. People that are active, illegal activities, we will prevent it. In fact, when I came to this property the first time, your sheriff department came to me and said, "Oh, thank you very much. At least you're going to get it open because we have trash here every day." I mean, what happened previously with previous owners, you can't blame me. I can only assure you that we're going to keep it clean and get it done the best way we can and prevent from any problems.
So I would very much like to know the name of that property. You said that the 10 acres that you still
Super Value Inn,
own.
Fredericksburg, Virginia.
What's the name of the?
Super Value Inn. It used to be the Econo Lodge, 180-room property. It used to be infested with a lot of issues.
Okay.
Now it's, you come and look at the property, you walk through the property, come inside, look at it, look at the rooms, conditions, everything is up to standard.
And how many units are there? How many? 80?
180.
180. And I guess.
Running 80% occupancy.
80%.
And that make money, bring money to the restaurants here, and I guess keep less traffic on the beach.
I was curious about Super Value Inn. Are any of those rooms occupied or paid for by social services?
Not social services, but during these COVID viruses, the government has come in and taken some rooms. Yes.
Okay, I'm just curious about the
The
number.
reason for that, and like I said when we had a meeting previously, I can't stop. If your sheriff department brings a guy there, totally drunk, by law, I have to take him, even if he doesn't have the money. That's the law. Because if he goes out and hurts somebody, I'll be responsible. By law, it clearly states that if somebody comes in on your property, totally drunk, even if the law doesn't bring him, I have to accommodate him. Now what he does, there's nothing I can do. But that's the way the law is in the hotel industry. If somebody comes drunk, I cannot refuse him a room. I have to give it to him. What he does, I have to call the state and say, hey, this is what happened, and this is what he did. So in that sense, that's only negativity about the hotel industry. We cannot turn people away if they're drunk in any way, or if mentally tormented, or any way illnesses. I'm also going to give you an example. We had a lady that came at the motel, was battered by her husband. My staff called me, what do we do? I said, give her a room. Put her in a room right now and call the medics, see what they say. So we put her in a room. Yeah, my room was, blood stains and everything, but we have to do something sometimes. We have to do it. Social services will come in. I think in her case, the child support enforcement came in because she had kids with her. So sometimes we have to act in a humanitarian way too. He might be a drug addict, but to cure him, we have to help him too. Because if you leave him on the street, he's going to continue doing it. But I don't have that intentions on this property. This property here is for, I want to develop it into sense for middle class people. Everybody's not super rich. There are people here who are middle who want to come here on weekends or weekdays, spend 2 days or 3 days with the kids. When I didn't have money, I used to come to Colonial Beach with my kids. I used to go on the pier here, go to Wilkerson Restaurant, and all the way back to George Washington birthplace, where my kids grew up. Now both are educated, they're happy, but that's why I want to come back to Colonial Beach. It's not all about money, it's also about life, and I think that's why we want to come here.
I did have one other question. Would you be managing and retaining ownership of the property, or are you intending to sell it?
No. I don't think I want to sell it. If I buy it, I don't want, this property will not be sold. I mean, after me, or after my wife, I don't know. But I can say for us two, no. We're going to develop it and we want to keep it. And I want to come here myself. Because Wilkerson Restaurant is one of my favorite places. Like I say, I've been here for a long time, but that's where I want to go eat. And I think the 4 seasons, when I've been coming here this application has been done since March. I waited, so that tells I'm here all the time. You had a pharmacy here that belonged to a fellow Indian friend of mine.
Yes.
So I knew him too. So I'm a pharmacist by profession too. But the way it is at my age, I feel like I want to calm down a little bit and, you know, stay here. And I do want to come here on a weekend basis, or at least once or twice a week. Basically, I will also make it a retirement place so I can come and relax here. So I can assure you, I will not allow any trash there.
Yes, Bob.
First of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Patel. We really need that property developed, and so I have a couple of questions about which either one of you can answer about the plot. First of all, there's a red line kind of over near the, well, it goes through what used to be parking lot 15, or what is that? You know, kind of jiggled line there. What is that for?
I will let Mr. Street answer that.
Okay.
That was actually a scale, use of the scale. I had to do that because the plan I had was not working at all with my system.
Okay.
So that was deleted, I thought, but I guess it didn't.
Okay, well, right next to that, there's a color that's not on your legend, and where it says 9 feet over it.
Right.
Is that a green space as well?
No, that's that one I was explaining that was for the utility use of the old office, where it was going to be like where the fire sprinkler system is and all that stuff. If any maintenance was needed for that, that was for a maintenance person's separate from the calculations.
So it's like a maintenance building?
No, it's just a space form, because that's right next to where the office was. The old office is now.
Oh, the old office was like,
Right.
near 15 or whatever?
Yeah, it was near 15, and that gives them better access so that they can get in there and maintain it.
Okay, well, now I've got the count to 20, I figured that out now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my other question is where parking spaces used to be 21 and 22, I assume that this area is going to be, I get the dark gray area is where the buildings are, right?
The dark gray,
The rooms.
the L shape is the room. The other gray is the paved area. What's
Right.
supposed to be paved. Those red spaces are for the calculations.
No, I understand that, but
it's employee.
Let me rephrase my question is, how many units are going to be turned into the office area? And is the office area include the possibility of the manager staying overnight there?
Sometimes the manager may have to stay there overnight. Like on weekends, I guess you guys are busy here in the beach area. When I used to come here, I know Friday, Saturday was a busy area for you guys. But having a manager on site makes it easier for security.
Yes, of course, but is there a kitchen and bathroom in that same
Yes.
area?
I mean, they already have it, so. And just also has basically just gonna be, so if somebody comes in to check in and I need to use your restroom, right there. That area is also gonna be like, basically serve breakfast, or, you know, if people wanna come eat quickly like a cereal or breakfast, that area will be for breakfast area too, in the office. But 20 rooms, we don't expect, you know, everybody to come and eat breakfast at one time. 5 people, 6 people, at least there's something there to eat.
If I could
Thank
just state that we don't have any of this documentation in terms of like how many units, and this is the first time seeing this for me as well as you tonight. These are all things that we will have to address at site plan. It's good to get it out now and for you to review these details. I'll obviously work with the applicant on the site plan as well as floor plans, number of units, and so forth. So this will be forthcoming for you to review.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to clarify what.
Absolutely, thank you.
Like I said, we were just told to come today. We got an email today, come here, and we canceled all of our other meetings to be here.
I apologize for that, because we had requested it earlier, so I'm very glad that you're
I
here.
mean, this is going on since March. We've been calling, like somebody told you in the meeting, we
Yeah,
call,
I
and
didn't-
nobody answers.
Yes.
So eventually, I had to get Mr. Street here to, hey, you know, you in the back government, you know, can you help me with this? And he said, yeah, sure.
You had talked about the manager being on site. One of the conditions of the previous permit was that that there be a manager 24/7.
And that's what we will try to have.
That would be part of the conditional requirement.
Guaranteed I'll have it.
And also, you know, so have you had a chance to see some of those conditions before?
I've been in the hotel business for 33 years, and I think I see those conditions.
Okay.
Everywhere.
For example, a
But
24/7
the issue-
security guard?
I think the issue we had on one of the conditions was the state implication, that you cannot have this person stay here, that is a state law, you cannot prevent that. If a state comes here and tells me, hey VJ, I've got 20 people here who are cutting trees in this area and we want them to stay here, there's nothing I can do. I'm gonna sell you FEMA. If you have a hurricane here,
That's an important service.
okay, there's nothing I can do. So if there's a government organization, or I will also give you military, Dahlgren, because I've talked to certain people in Dahlgren, and they say, hey, we have people who don't want to stay in that area. We want to stay in Colonial Beach, but they don't want to pay $110 a day. So what rates are you going to be reflecting? So I'm saying mine is mid-tier. So that's where I'm going for. And I can assure you the rates are not going to be $20 either. If I'm going to spend the money that I'm spending in there, I don't think I'm going to rent a room for $20 or $19.95.
I was wondering, does the other commission members have questions? Okay, well, in light of all of the new things that you have talked about with the landscaping, the impervious coverage, the number of rooms that are being offered, and the new office space with the overnight facilities there, we're going to be discussing this at our next meeting, and at that time, then we'll have recommendation. So thank you very much for your presentation. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to talk to you, gentlemen.
It was
Thank
most
you.
interesting.
And thanks for that.
Thank you. All right, so we're then ready to move on to item number 6, which is the comprehensive plan update and discussion. All right, well, I got copies yesterday of the update, and I just thought I would put out any discussion items for the commission members on that.
I'm good with the updates and what you sent out. I mean, other than the one part that I wrote about the Potomac crossing. My only concern on that.
I did address the Potomac crossing.
I did see that.
And I did say in accord with the housing document.
And I think in the document for the comprehensive plan, we talked about that, how the development would occur in that area, could occur. As I said, I'm not sure that we wanted to limit ourselves strictly to, classifying it only as residential only. But I thought we needed to have some, and so we had it as a, what was it,
Can you turn your mic on, please?
Yeah, nobody can hear it.
You know, as we discussed it, we wanted to make sure that we had the flexibility in the comprehensive plan, and we didn't want to pin us into one specific type of the development of that area to say it was only residential, knowing that if it's up to 900 units in that area potentially, that you have to expect to have some type of convenience capability for those residents, as opposed to coming from Potomac Crossing all the way down into town here to get the loaf of bread or something like that. So I just want to make sure we don't restrict it too much in the wording.
Okay.
And I think the way we have the comprehensive plan, I don't think it restricts us all the way, but I just want to make sure that we kind of stay with that vein. I want to make sure that at least it's captured that way broadly, that it is developed for, there is some opportunity for commercial in that area.
Okay.
I see the point of that. I think it's important.
Yeah, I think your point is well taken. The problem was that we didn't want to take away from the town itself, knowing that we're having so much commercial places still available in town, we wanted to concentrate on there. That was the only reason why that was left. But it doesn't confine anybody coming again to a planning commission for an exemption.
Okay, as long as we have that,
That-
and I know the comprehensive plan it is, it's just,
I know.
it's a broad strategic
It
goal.
is a
objective, so-
broad thing, but it does not confine anybody
Okay,
to that. They can again come to the planning commission.
okay.
Any other discussion?
I noticed that there were a few things that I had listed that weren't, added. It was mostly, I think in the civic part, had a few problems, things that weren't taken out, but,
The what?
in the civic group section, I know there were a few places listed that weren't in town, which I don't know if they should have been listed
We
there.
struck most of the things that were not in town.
And I noticed there were 2 or 3, and I know there was a church that was not listed. And I can't remember which ones they were. I can talk to you about that on the side. but,
Okay. All right.
And I also noticed that the discussion on the issues of the infrastructure improvements, the storm mitigation, and the mapping that we need to do to be able to develop.
That is in there.
I looked for it. What section was it under?
I don't have my copy, I'm sorry. I gave my last copy away to Kathleen. There should be sections, multiple sections throughout that record different places where that occurs.
There's a land use section.
Okay.
Our areas. Existing land use, Potomac Crossing. But what I don't see is the proposed and the existing land use.
So let me ask you, because, you know, I was just looking for the discussion of the infrastructure and, you know, how we can come together with
If you notice in
plan.
Wire Comp Plan, Chapter 1, most of the infrastructure was there because the data that people gave to us, that's where it existed. And the people's requests were put into goals and objectives in accord with the vision statement. That's where it's mainly listed. Wire Comprehensive Plan.
Did you get my list?
Yes, I did.
Okay. 'Cause I know there's under local road improvement needs in the transportation section. That whole section has been completed. The replacement of the bridge by Wilkerson, so that doesn't need to be in there anymore. That can just be taken out.
Which section?
It's the transportation section. It's on the first page, I think, at least in the updated version. Where it says local road improvement needs, that was completed.
Just sworn I made that adjustment.
Well, this is not the latest.
Oh, that's not the latest. Oh, okay.
I'm looking at the one.
Kathleen, can I see the transportation section?
Yeah, the one that was emailed to me still has it in there.
I don't have any copy printed out.
Would have been the first page, I think.
Previous revision.
First page.
That's the last page. It's the other staple here backwards there.
I should have
There
this
you go.
one for it.
That's the first page.
All right, would you show me that, please?
Oh.
First page, where?
Local road improvement needs.
Yes.
Yeah, that doesn't need to be in there. That was the bridge that
Oh,
they
that's right.
rebuilt by Wilkerson.
I'm sorry.
And then, where's the other one? In the services section, there's a few organizations that are
That's-
missing. and
is
they're
that
just
community
duplicate.
service?
Yeah, community services.
All right, Kathleen, I have your transportation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I
Okay,
gave you my
that's all right.
last copy.
Yeah, thanks.
Is that under?
What are we looking at now?
Community services,
Under section.
the community organization section.
It's at the last of it, right? The end
On
of
this
the
one,
report.
it's the first
Oh.
page, but I don't know if it's different in
Oh,
there.
okay.
Okay, churches?
Can I get one of those?
Monroe Bay Assembly of God and New Monroe
That's
Bay
all.
are not in
That's
town.
my
That's
only
not
copy.
copies?
Huh?
Pardon me.
No, this is just one copy
Monroe Bay
that she
Assembly
had
of God
provided
and
us.
New Monrovia are not in town,
It's-
so
you
I
don't
don't know
have
if they
the,
should be listed or not.
What I sent you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't have a printer.
that amazes me because
Those two.
Pam did this, and so they're not in Colonial Beach?
No, they're not in Colonial Beach.
And
Yeah.
the Catholic Church, which is right in town, is not mentioned here.
Yeah, the Catholic Church on the one here, and then I don't know what the status of, Livingstone Community Church is, but that's another one I think in town.
Yeah, they don't actually have.
They don't have an official church, but I don't know if they're like chartered here or how that works, but they're another one that needs to be looked into. And there's no Girl Scouts listed on here.
Pardon me, but there's no Girl
The
Scouts?
Girl Scouts, I don't think are listed.
And the Colonial Beach Performing Arts Association is not listed.
Pardon me? Okay.
Oh, and the-
Send me an email, and I'll take care of it.
Okay, and.
All right.
Moose Lodge isn't in town.
And the new
Yeah,
organization. the
but
Green
that
Space.
plays a role in Colonial Beach life.
So are we going for organizations that play a role in the town, or are we going for?
Well, the
strictly-
community uses it.
Okay. Are we going to go that way though, that community outside of town, or are we just sticking with ones in town?
I don't know, I just listed them under community organizations, and then Pam verified whether people in this town used it.
Okay, well, I mean, that can kind of be a.
Right, yeah, I think that we need to
Strange.
stay in our jurisdiction.
Yeah,
Okay.
it just makes it more.
All right, so
simple.
what one comes off?
The Moose Lodge and Women of the Moose are not in town.
Okay.
Is the Salvation Army anywhere in here?
Technically not in town, even though they have a trailer.
They have a trailer, but
Oh, that's
that's,
the Goodwill.
Yeah, that's the Goodwill.
Salvation Army doesn't have an office here, do they?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
that's Bay Agent, so.
I did have a question overall. Were there any conflicts in people's, what they've turned in against this?
Well, that's what I did. I took the data, which is all of this. This is the responses to the questionnaires, to all the interviews, and all of the community meetings that we had. So I went with everything everybody sent to the data to verify it.
Okay.
Because we can't keep adding things that are not in the data that we receive. Now, I have to say, lots of people talked about the water problem. That isn't there.
Okay.
Yes, Bob?
Okay, in the section on town vision statement is a list of action items. And I suggested that they be matched up with, let's see, Y comprehensive plan has a list of capital improvement projects.
Yes, for the
And
next 10
nothing
years.
that I suggested was done. So we're just wondering, if that's what the commission wants, fine.
Well, infrastructure is capital improvements.
Well, then why aren't they mentioned in capital improvements? I mean, why aren't they mentioned in the action plan?
Because the action plan and capital improvements are different. Action plan is for the town council to meet those expectations in 10 years. The actual plan for the all of the infrastructure items and all of the capital improvements goes with the capital improvement plan that we, as a commission, are required to do.
The vision is the strategy, and the CIP is a narrow implementation of some of the tactical items, but it has its own set of requirements by state code for capital expenditures, and the way that we have to allocate and approve those. It is very narrowly defined, and this is very broadly defined as what we'd like to see as a vision for the community. So it's not that they don't cooperate with one another, but most of the stuff in the vision statement is outside the purview of the capital improvement process. So capital improvement basically means large, big ticket infrastructure investment that exceeds $50,000. It will take multiple years of implementation, and is fairly narrowly focused on infrastructure, whereas the vision and the actions for the vision establish a lot more breadth to how we want our town to be holistically. So that is not just infrastructure, it is the atmosphere, the type of amenities that we're trying to pursue, the development that we'd like to attract. So very broadly describing those things. So that's the compare and contrast for the two. Does that make sense, Bob?
Hardly.
Well, the
I
capital
still say, I mean, there are obviously crossovers.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Eight says review by building guidelines, and as being as a comprehensive, as being in capital improvement. And that's also, of course, in our action plan.
Just chase them all.
It seems to me that stormwater improvements, it's not in the
Those
action
will be
plan.
issues that we, as a commission, will make sure is on the capital improvement plan presented each year.
Right, so we're about to start the new capital improvement cycle because we just passed July.
And it's August.
Yeah.
So it's starting from, we should start the capital improvement plan in
Right.
August.
Because we have to have the plan ready to present to the new council in January. So we've got the next
5 months to do the capital improvement plan for next year.
And so this is where we talk to department heads, and we talk to, especially about the stormwater things, it's the hot topic, and pull together that information about what can we actually allocate funds towards, and also give direction to council. So for example, if we were to have some transactions with the town property, that funding would be allocated towards the CIP priorities, because that's what's already been outlined. And so
I still don't understand why, for example, the last two on the list are capital improvements, monitor and enforce the Chesapeake Bay Act, and train and support town staff. How are those?
Those are improvements of how we learn whether all those improvements are correct. And we need to research more continually. Every time we get new people, we have to bring them up to date. Having read the Chesapeake Bay Act fully and all of the ins and outs of how to improve it, it means education on the part of every commissioner.
Well, it seems like, to me, it's an action item, but I guess I think of capital improvement as building something tangible. You know?
I know what you're saying, but that's the separation that the state makes in developing this whole thing.
So one of the capital improvements that I recommended that I didn't see in there was that Nathan and I met with the town manager, and we learned that within the near term, the water tower is going to have to get an inside new wrap. Not talking about the paint on the outside to preserve it, but I did not see
But
that.
that would be something in dialogue.
It's over $200,000.
That's
on
something
average.
in dialogue with the office. If you look in the process of the capital improvement plan, there are duties that we do each month, starting in August, going through to December, so that we have completed our presentation to the council for January.
Right,
They
so-
get it.
And part of that was because we had just passed the last iteration of the capital improvement onto council. What we had, when we had that meeting, that was already past the deadline for that edition. So this new iteration will include.
Oh, well,
the
we
water
did talk
tower.
about it maybe, in the future, 2 years out, 3 years out. It's not an immediate thing.
But it's
Correct,
up to
so-
the commission to investigate those items.
We'll have more meetings like the one that we had
Uh-huh.
previously with Mr. Murphy and Mr. Robinson and the other department heads, and talk to them about what those needs are gonna look like for them to have input on that capital improvement plan, in addition to the other things that have been identified by the citizenry.
Yeah.
To bring that together, because as Quinn mentioned, that they can't go and levy a whole bunch of taxes to do a bunch of cool stuff, but they do, or have gotten to the point where they can make some of those hard decisions about moving forward, what those priorities are, as well as having that future potential for allocation of funds from real estate transactions from the town. With this guidance, it will require that council adheres to those things on the comprehensive plan as priorities when they are deciding how to allocate those extra funds, as well as those real estate transaction funds that are put into that comprehensive plan funding. Because that is a separate line item in the town budget.
One of the things that we heard echoed this evening from everyone's testimony, and I have to say that we are looking at creating a future plan for the needs of the community.
Right.
And this is a very expensive item that should be part of the comprehensive plan, so it doesn't come out of the blue 2 or 3 years out when we might need that to be allocated.
Okay.
So all I'm saying is that just infrastructure is important, and I think that it should be given more credibility. And then just lastly, just very briefly, looking at the transportation issue, which is something that, we need to include in the plan as well. The impact that all of the expansions are happening with regard to the bridge. And the increase in traffic going from 30,000 per day up to 50 or more, especially with the expansion of the eastern bypass of 301.
Right, I put that all in, but what I'm saying to
I
you.
didn't see it, but
It's in the new,
okay.
I wrote it in.
Okay.
But the thing you have to remember is, the capital improvements were all recommended by the citizenry of this town. And that's what you have in why a comprehensive plan. That work is for the planning commission.
It's an illustration of to the citizenry of what we're doing behind the scenes. This is a method of communicating how the mechanisms that we are currently using functions, and that's why it gives the schedule and a list of some of the things we've accomplished previously and what we're looking forward to. We don't have to be explicit with the comprehensive plan, including all of the current CIP actions. The CIP is an annual process that continues forward on an iterative basis. It does not have to be.
It's a 5-year
specific.
process, actually, the CIP. It's, we have the annual and then the long-term.
Well, Colonial Beach does
So-
not have the money to, it should be a 5-year plan. But you will find in the infrastructure things that are in there already, it amounts to over $5 million. So we are selling property, yes, and that goes into the capital improvement plan. But just look at the stormwater problem.
Yeah,
And I'm saying, right now, we have enough things in this design which the people recommended in their surveys and in their reports. We've got to move with that.
I hear you, and I think that we've done a good job of collecting all the ideas and what the expectations are in the community. But we also have to include that we are including information that we're not even aware of yet. Like today, for example, with the concern over the flooding in key areas. Without that rain, we probably wouldn't have had all of our speakers here today. And we probably wouldn't have identified.
Virginia Avenue was identified by the people,
Yes.
and it exists in it.
So all I'm saying is that, we have to go beyond just what the community is saying and look at what the future needs are that people aren't aware of.
And that's what we did in doing the plan. But we can't update it every minute. We've got to get this much passed and then make amendments to the plan.
I have a question. Somehow I heard that a capital improvement, there's a minimum cost for it. Is that true?
Yeah.
Correct, $50,000.
$50,000. So have we assigned a $50,000 cost to monitoring and enforcing the Chesapeake Bay Act?
No, we haven't assigned a monetary thing to that. It would cost educationally and also implementation. The problem in the past has been we have made decisions without knowledge of the Chesapeake Bay Act.
I just have trouble seeing that as a capital improvement, I guess. But if we think it is, I guess it is.
Many of our water problems would not be existing right now if we had followed the Chesapeake Bay Act. With the homes that are built right now. I could cite you 10 right now that should never have been built and now have caused water problems.
I don't doubt it. Okay, well, I assume that we were asked to try to find things that the public, the public came to us and asked about and were not in the comprehensive plan. So I listed these and I looked again in the revised plan and they still aren't in there. So I just want to make sure that the commission does not want to include these items that the people asked about. 1, enhancing the pier. 2, the beach sand study. 3, community center, facility for arts and culture. 5, well, I'm not counting. There was an emphasis on family-focused activities. I don't see that in the action plan.
That's
More inclusive outdoor activities. I don't see inclusive outdoor activities added. Grants for park and rec, it's kind of mentioned, but not as I think the people were asking for. And tourism plan and plan for parking. Parking is not mentioned in the comprehensive plan. Seems to me we should be covering that.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of areas where we need to expand it.
Do that.
I have already sent it to them. It's a PDF format because I made the contact with John Bateman, Jerry Bateman, And also to RAFT. I'm on their committee and.
Kathleen should be included in
Oh,
that.
Kathleen was notified, absolutely.
Okay.
Because we are wanting to move along, and I think we have a document now that is becoming, you know, at a stage where we can have a benefit from their review. So that's where we are. And any other comments then on the comprehensive plan? All right, so we're ready to move on to development standards. I know it's been a long, long evening, but one of the things that we had talked about at our last meeting was maybe looking at separating the requirement under development standards for R1 district of separating out sidewalks from curb and gutter. We talked about how curb and gutter needs to be part of an integral system that is planned in such a way that it doesn't cause the pooling of water on one side or the other that may not have curb and gutter installed. And so we're looking at ways to mitigate that pooling of water. And that's a concern that we raised at the last meeting. We also talked about how sidewalks, part of a sidewalk or a sidewalk in front of an existing house where there's no adjacent sidewalks would cause water to pool on either side. Where there may be a culvert or maybe an open drainage ditch. So, I mean, there's a lot to consider with this issue. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on what we should do.
And if I could just add, I have 5 or 6 new single-family homes, building permits, sitting on my counter, waiting to be notified if they're gonna require sidewalks, to construct the sidewalks, curb and gutter. So, I know we discussed this in length at the last meeting, and if there's something that I can bring to the town council next week, would be wonderful. Just, you know, there's a lot to talk about, there's a lot to look at, but we need to have something to give to town council, to give me direction as to what am I going to tell these builders when they come in for a building permit. Are they going to build a sidewalk? Are they going to build curb and gutter? Do we require them to do that? Because right now we're in limbo.
I don't have
Kathleen?
I'm scared.
What do you suggest?
I thought we talked about sidewalks
Yeah.
when they're adjacent to those areas like the school. And I forget the term we use for that.
Yes, near buildings that are public
It's like
buildings.
having-
Or almost like a priority area.
And then that would be the one where there's no wiggle room, so you're gonna put a sidewalk in because.
But where are these areas? Are we going to identify
Right, so,
them?
yeah, we would have to go through and do that whole process. Have you talked to Mr. Murphy about any of these?
Oh, yeah.
Whether or not they qualify for an exemption because they do have existing stormwater management in front of them?
We have, Mr. Murphy and Quinn and I have discussed these. What we're trying to avoid is looking at each and every case one by one and having to make a decision at the staff level.
Correct.
That's why we brought it to the council, and that's why council has brought it to you.
Right.
Because we don't want this to be a staff decision.
Right.
We need direction as to how to direct the builders.
I think at this point, the sidewalks are aspirational, even in a required area without going through the whole due process, which will take several months, right? So not to kick the can down the road, but if that's something that we really want to pursue, that we need to have an initiative internally that goes through and looks at mapping that prioritization in compliance with what we've got laid out in the planned use maps. So
I agree. I
that
think,
at this point, it's really hard to arbitrarily mandate sidewalks just because of that, in my opinion. The curb and gutter issue is similar in regard to, I firmly believe curb and gutter should be deferred to stormwater management plan being implemented. That way there is an engineering basis for the reasoning. So essentially
until
what I'm
then, we
saying
do
right
not
now-
require the builders to build curb and gutter until a stormwater management plan.
well, I like the way the language is written where the builder can ask for a waiver.
Right, so that's the problem.
To keep it in place as it is, the requirement, but allow a waiver.
That's the problem. That's what we're trying to avoid.
I
It's
know,
going
but
to
I don't think we're
every
ready
single-
to avoid
Because
it.
every builder is gonna ask for a waiver.
Because
Yes.
that, what we're doing is we're putting an administrative burden on the staff that is undue. And that is the whole point of having this discussion, because if there was no problem with it the way it is, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So the revision, in my opinion, should be to currently just strike this altogether and then come back and make a proposal later, once stormwater management has been determined, to put in an addition for curb and gutter specifically, and then defer any sidewalk conversation to also a holistic level of, that's something for council to decide. Because unless we come forward and say specifically, we have determined that these uses are compatible with sidewalks, and if you're going to be in, for example, the resort commercial, then you absolutely have to have sidewalks on the right of way. And then go through and have the mapping that is congruent with the desired areas, i.e. primarily what people are talking about is around the school, and then the places where people tend to walk frequently, which would be all of Irving, which is obviously cost prohibitive, and then the resort commercial area. So school is safety and compliance, and that's already being addressed. It has been previously, and they're also currently having plans to address that situation as well, with some of the grants and the construction initiatives that they have. So that is currently underway. That is the #1 priority, right? Health and safety, welfare. And beyond that, it is been determined outside of that purview of the immediate area of the schools. It's the commercial corridor, which currently already has sidewalks and doesn't necessarily have a whole lot under review. And then beyond that, the resort commercial area, because we've already determined that all of Irving is cost prohibitive. Because if that's one of those projects, if you start that Yellow Brick Road, you're going all the way to Oz. So to me, that's how we have to parse the issues, personally.
I like the idea of it being part of the plan and not just picking an area and saying, you know, without the study being done to determine where we put those resources and where the resources could go.
So what I'm saying is our guidance for now is to strike this completely and then come back to it with the understanding that stormwater management will take care of curb and gutter, and then sidewalks will be determined at the council level, because
They're part of the plan, they're referenced in the
that
comprehensive
is
plan,
correct.
the new one.
That is correct. And until it becomes a CIP item, i.e. we have either a developer looking to do some proffers, or we have the town, you know, quote unquote, hits the lottery, we're not gonna wholesale pave the entire town, all 52 miles of town road with sidewalks.
Well, I think that in areas like Classic Shore, where there is a lot of infill development going on, we would be missing an opportunity to require the builders put those sidewalks in. And, you know, this would be something that wouldn't cost the taxpayers anything. But after we reach a certain level of sidewalks on a given street, then, you know, it might be in our best interest to have the town go forward and complete the whole street with sidewalks. So that's why I don't want to eliminate this entirely, but
I'm not saying eliminate it forever. I'm saying for the guidance that council is seeking currently. I'm not talking forever. I'm just saying right now, staff and council are asking for guidance on how to do this so that they don't have an undue administrative burden. Right now, I think that between the health, safety, and welfare of the children in the school area being addressed proactively, and the fact that the other opportunities are not necessarily either cohesive or in line with being prioritized holistically for the entire town. Because think about it this way. Yes, let's say every new house that's built in Classic Shores has to have a sidewalk. How does that benefit anybody in the Point? How does that benefit anybody in the Meadows?
it doesn't, but the point is
Exactly.
that where there's a number of lots that are available for infill is much greater in Classic Shore than it is at the Point, which there are very few infill lots available. So focusing on areas where we could see a cost reduction of the installation of sidewalks that builders would pay for, that we wouldn't have to pay for as taxpayers. But also looking at First Street, and I believe that there's already money in escrow for sidewalks on First Street, isn't that right?
That's what
But the builders have put in escrow?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
I mean, essentially, we would be turning that resource down. But I have to agree with you. I just don't think we're ready yet to require that sidewalks come in.
I think
It's
Mike-
unfortunate, because I would really like to see them come.
I think Mike has a great idea for now. Sidewalks should be installed in areas where there are, that are determined as, what's the word?
I don't know, in terms of health and safety, but I hear what Nathan's saying, and I think I'm waffling back a little bit on what I said, because if we were already looking at that, the sidewalks near schools as a town, I don't know how we address that as the one-off thing, but going back to the broader discussion of the curbs, gutters, and sidewalks, I think we can't say you need to do it or you can't, or you shouldn't do it until we see what the overall stormwater management plan is, because we could be saying here, yep, everywhere in Classic Shores needs to have a sidewalk. Well, a stormwater management plan may say, that's the worst thing in the world could happen, we need culverts or ditches put in. And now we jerk a builder around. And it's easier to go back and dig out a ditch if we need to, as a town, than it is to just say, well, what if the builder puts one in? Well, maybe this isn't an area that needs it. We're gonna go back to that, every one is gonna be looked at individually.
So what I'm trying to do is parse the issue so that we can provide the guidance that council's looking for now, and then address holistically, long-term, those other issues that we have. So the right now guidance is go ahead and remove number 6 curb, gutter, and sidewalk requirements from the R1 standard until
And R2. It's in R2 and R1.
R1 and R2. So we remove it at this point until we have and we need to write this as part of the recommendation, until the point at which the comprehensive town stormwater management plan has been advanced to the point where we can make a recommendation based on engineering for curb and gutter requirements and stormwater management.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
If I can add something, I just think we should separate the curb and gutter from the sidewalk.
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
Now we can, then, if we can do that, and we can all agree that curb and gutter should be delayed, and it already says here that site surveys shall provide for management of stormwater. So we'll let that ride for now, okay? Then I would like to talk about sidewalks.
That was the
Why-
dot.
What do people on the point care about sidewalks? And I say they do care, because we stand for an attractive town. It's gonna attract people if their kids can walk on a sidewalk rather than, having to navigate a ditch on their way to school. So, I would like to see as much as possible that we say we're going to, include sidewalks in those areas that are public use. Some language like that. That's
Right,
what I would like.
So that's the second part of the recommendation. So we separate curb and gutter. Curb and gutter is deferred until stormwater management though. Sidewalks is deferred until we can analyze, like I said, take the whole land use map and future development map and map out those areas that are prioritized. But instead of just saying all of R1, we want to make the priorities in the specific areas where it will have the highest impact, right?
So is our recommendation going to be to the council to say, we are further studying the sidewalks to
Yes.
come up with, okay,
To come up with a recommendation that
on
will.
sidewalks?
Yes, a sidewalk plan for the town.
And all the Rs.
Right, so, yeah. And that way, we can say, as written in R1 and R2, we should go ahead and vote to remove that. And we will replace in future, after study on both parts, A and B, or sidewalk and curb and gutter separately, are studied, and we will have future recommendations for a new implementation.
So does everyone agree to that, and do you understand what you
Yeah.
can come to?
Okay, so we are separating curb and gutter and sidewalks, and then we're saying curb and gutter is going to be deferred until stormwater management plan is completed to the point where there can be an engineering standard applied to it. And then the sidewalk is going to be deferred until we can do an analysis on the areas that are prioritized for pedestrian traffic and prioritized.
And informed by the stormwater management.
Also informed by
Exactly.
stormwater management.
Yes, because that addresses the need immediately and allows us the opportunity later on.
Gets it off your plate, and we can still have these discussions, we can still make these decisions, but it doesn't have to be right now, so we can help with, I know you are stretched tighter than a drum.
Thank you.
And so we're trying to help you out at the same time, so we can address the immediate needs as well as the future needs.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Are we done with that? We don't have to vote or anything, right? Yeah.
No.
Just one little thing is that Nathan has agreed to be part of the RAFT group. And our first meeting with Nathan is going to be on Thursday. It's a Zoom meeting. We're very excited about that.
Sorry, what group?
It's called RAFT. It's a resilience group that is helping
Oh,
to...
RAFT.
Yes. To help map out some strategies for Colonial Beach to address flooding and rising tide issues, which are two different things, as well as the incursion of parts of the community on the other side of the river.
If it's not, it may not be quite another topic, but could I make a comment on the public?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, the people that talked about the park, it would be nice if we could have responded to them and said, it is in our comprehensive plan to have green space, and my personal reaction to their discussions was that there is an agenda here that they're not really coming up with, and I really don't know exactly what it is.
They don't
but-
want,
Huh?
they don't want Eleanor Park to just sit there.
They don't want it to be a park.
Right.
Well, yeah,
Well,
that's the
that's-
two things that it doesn't seem like there's, in what I'm kind of gathering just organically is that they want to discourage organized development. And this is a way to kind of put a stake in the sand to keep it as a community-oriented location without having to, put a lot into the development. But they kind of push your finger on it for right now so that it can be held, rather than having the next developer come along and offer them $1 million and have that fight again. It's just, that's my 2 cents worth, that's what it seems
I
like.
think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I think they wanna see the revenue for the town.
Are you talking an RV park or just the playground?
The playground in general.
Well,
I think they see it that it.
I'm sorry, the entire park.
If you put the playground in their mind, put the playground in, you basically taking out half the potential for revenue earnings.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
that's an exaggeration, but they did say that.
That's what they're alluding to with,
That's what I thought.
by the
But-
time you,
But I believe that this commission,
Are we being taped now?
This is still.
I believe that this commission feels that there's 2 separate issues here. One is the playground, and the other is, that area being designated as a park. And it kind of confused them in my mind, because, there are separate issues. I believe, you stated, Madam Chairman, that, the council has already decided to have a playground there. So I'm not sure that we have much input in it, like you said. We certainly have input on any kind of, development in the park, and we probably should have had on this item, I don't know, but that's, to me, they're very separate issues.
Well, if that's, any more discussion, then I think we can adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So,
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.